Good evening. I'd like to call to order the April 20th special work session, budget preview, Morrisville Town Council. The time is now 6:30. I'll turn it over to the town manager, Martha Page, to kick off the meeting.
Thank you, Mayor. Want to provide just a little bit of context. I did that initially, but want to just sort of refresh. This is the first time we've done this kind of budget preview. But as we talked at the retreat and agreed that we wanted to keep the budget process a little bit more streamlined, that with so much going on, I'm sort of referring to it as almost a plain vanilla type of budget year. It doesn't mean we won't ask for the stuff we need. Doesn't mean that there won't be stuff that we're going to talk about. But at least to, I think, staff, it's feeling a little bit more efficient. But there's some things that, sort of want to, that I do know that would create conversation. This is not a budget. There's probably little to no numbers in here, as you've seen by the materials that we've sent you out. It's not everything you're going to ultimately see in a budget, but just some highlight topics that help us get a little bit more direction on some of those items, maybe answer some of the questions we know you already have, or the things that already take up some time. And so trying to keep it pretty high level. Doesn't mean there's other stuff off the table, but we focused on some specific areas here that we really feel like we took the lead from for you. So pretty casual, pretty relaxed, no votes, no anything like that, lots of discussion. So that's really just the framework of what we're going to talk about today. Just our Chief Dooley. Okay, all right. So we purposely kind of asked other staff not to be here so that you'd feel candid, because there's some personnel stuff in here, and that's just always difficult when you're talking about, winners and losers and stuff like that. So we often, as we put together a budget message, compare to our prior year and talk about the growth of our budget, and we end up comparing tax rates and some things like that. But there's a bigger perspective that we looked at this year, just to sort of see how our budget shapes up to what we've experienced in the past. We know that we've had that explosive growth for a number of years, and it influences what we can do, what we can offer, what we can provide, the workload on staff, the revenue that we get in. It just really affects everything that we do. And so I tried to just put it in some different perspective than what we typically look at when we get into the budget. So I just went ahead and said, where were we at 10 years ago? And so, we were at less than, I can't even read my own handwriting here. We were at less than 14,000 population 10 years ago. And now that's 75% growth over the 10 years. And 27% of that has been really in the last 5. Just some benchmarks. We had 154 employees in 2011. Just to compare, at the end of last year, we had 162. We know that's now 170. But look at the growth in our streets and how that affects our public works departments. Look at how much more greenways we have that we have to take care of and maintain. And the number of parks. We've added another one even since 2016. So all of those things really show where we've grown and what drives some of our budget expense. It also really fuels our need to periodically stop and look and evaluate ourselves internally and how we're taking care of our own internal resources that we need to do in order to keep up with this pace of growth and still do the other things that we still have coming on board. So the theme is just, it's a year of replenishment. And as you see some of the requests that have come through the departments, you're going to see some of those themes coming forward. Councilmember Garamella, you have a question?
Just when you're flipping the slide, the 5/96.
I'm sorry, 5 parks, and that's the number of acres of land that we're taking care of. Yes. And so that 12 acres is Church Street Park, and we of course have added Northwest in 2017. Someone drive. Thank you. So a different snapshot. Let's look at our revenues. And just so you know, so full kind of disclosure, I took out water and sewer because it was still in our 2007 numbers and really it doesn't make it comparable if we look at that. What's this revenues? Okay. So our budget was, no, this is expenditures. So our expenditures budget in 2007 was $19.3 million. And we're at about 31.2. Now, I've taken out fund balance appropriations there to make it comparable. But that's a little bit less than 6% annual growth in our expenditures. And it doesn't work exactly that way. That's just an annual growth. And so then I did some analysis as to what was driving that growth. Lots of capital projects in our roads and infrastructure. And I think we know that's obviously the case. And most of these are more recent. These are ones we've all done together. So, again, it really does illustrate that we've got that momentum to get some things done. And it also frames why we don't have a lot of capacity to take on any more big projects like this than the ones we're already talking about. We've set up some reserve fund allocations that we were not doing in 2007. So we are not only taking care of our current business, we're saving money for the future. And the two that we established last year were the roadway and transportation and the CIP reserve. So those are monies we've set aside to continue to put away outside of our fund balance and designate them for the things that we want to do. So that's an important part of our budget now, and you will see that continue in a proposed budget. And then we've made some significant technology investments, even outside of the enterprise project. Just as you grow and the world has changed, we have made a lot of technology investments. And just comparison, those items alone are $4 million of our current budget. And if you took those out to compare back to 2007, that would really be about a 4% growth in our normal operations outside of those capital investments. So just some perspective there. When you look at our revenues, we've had a 61% overall growth in our general fund revenues in the 10 years. Our single biggest revenue has been, will likely continue to be, our property taxes. The 58% is not unusual for governments. We've talked about that before. And remember, there's always two components of that. It's our growth, and then it's our tax rate and our assessed value. We've also been very successful in the intergovernmental revenues, which is our primarily our sales tax. So as we grow, we get more of those shares. And a good benchmark comparison when we talk about our growth is our per capita. So we are getting more money per capita now for our population than we did. Well, we got it more in 2007 than we are now because of the growth. Is it significantly different? No, but it's gone down a little bit because we've grown so fast. This is not an all-encompassing look at our revenues. These are just the primary ones that I feel like are driven by growth. We also know we've been successful at grants. There's been changes in some of the other things. You know, we absorbed the loss of the privilege license. We did that internally. I mean, that's one of the things that would drive that per capita down. There's been changes in the way the utility franchise tax and those things are calculated, but so this is just a picture of those that really, I think, relate mostly to growth.
Question. Does sales tax fit in that revenues per capita?
It does. It does. There's a variety of ways sales tax go through to us, but the way it's shown here, it's just based on our growth. I've mentioned that we've lost the privilege license. It's not a huge impact on our budget because it's a smaller number, but 500% difference in investment earnings, and that used to be something that was just a bigger component when interest rates were different with the monies we kept in our reserve. But it's just to show how things change over the years. And then, you know, the non growth revenues that make so much of our budget are very variable and much more unpredictable. So they're just a little bit more difficult to forecast. Inspections, permits, and things like we've mentioned already, the utility franchise revenues. So when we're really looking at making sure that we're forecasting, we're really focusing much more on those things that are much more predictable than the things that vary a lot more. Councilmember Johnson?
Just a quick question about the investment earnings. So that was the total earnings in 7 versus 16? Correct. And what about the balances in each of those years then? Were they equivalent, or was it strictly that the rate is different?
It is substantially the rates. I did not look at the balances, but we have grown our fund balance and our cash reserves. That is true. So more money, even less earnings. So it may be even more than that. Now, I don't think that we have relied as much on that as what perhaps other municipalities do, but it does affect us. Would you agree? I would agree. Yeah. There's lots of places that really were hit very hard because of the extent of the investment activities they did that we just don't do a lot. So with our continued strong revenue, I continue to feel that there's capacity in our current budget to request the things that I think we can manage through the year. And I think it also shows why our conservative budget approach works and I think will continue to work with us, that we're investing in our future. Looking at our expenditures, talking about $17 million versus 20. Hello? Okay. A little bit less than 4% annual growth. Looking at our functional areas, so this isn't people or vehicles, this is just which area of government has experienced the most increase. So development services, really small planning department back in 2007, which includes our inspectors, our planners, and our engineers. So many less people and much smaller breadth of activity. So the biggest growth department in our operations, but not surprisingly, Public Works, with all of that additional stuff, is not far behind. General government, that's all of us, and that includes all of the things that we're budgeting, those reserves and all of those things that you're handling at our level that don't tie directly to one department is what drives a lot of that. A lot of that is our debt, the fund balance appropriations for the major projects, those types of things. And then public safety as well. Their budgets are already a little bit larger, or a lot larger, I guess, depending on your perspective, than some of the others. But none of these really surprised me, and I don't think they'll surprise you too. In contrast, as we've grown, we've spent much less per capita for our employees, for our population growth. So what does that tell me? We have really effectively managed. We probably used up more capacity that existed. We've probably been good at making strategic investments in our operations and our personnel, and it shows that we still have some capacity within our existing budget to spend money on the projects that we want to. So I feel a very balanced and controlled growth in the cost of our services, and that gap at even this per capita level shows that we still have that capacity for programming within our current means without a tax increase. So for what we're doing and how we're looking at our changing landscape, who we are, what we serve, I think there's capacity. And that's just the framework that we've approached the budget this year. The last just historical context is debt. Looking at it in a couple ways, our total debt, which looks huge, well, That is some parks improvements. That's a fire station. This doesn't even include McCrimmon at this point. We've been making strategic investments. You can see it didn't significantly change our per capita, and it's still a very small amount of our overall budget. It just two contexts there, that we're not overburdening ourselves or our citizens with debt payments, and that's the context that I offer that in. So before I go into anything else, is there any questions I can answer, or is there other information? You can think about it now, you can think about it later, about sort of where we were, where we are.
It was very helpful.
Okay.
When you talk about higher growth function areas, is that growth in staff numbers or in dollars?
Both. Some of the percentages are based on dollars, but those dollars include new personnel.
Understood. Thank you.
TJ, your microphone's off.
Yes.
I have a question about the debt per capita. Could we track that in like the CIP somewhere along the lines, or see a projection on with the new debt coming on and then with it coming off as it does over the years, how that?
Yes, we do that. You're talking about retirement of debt?
Yeah, and use this figure, use the debt per capita, see it somewhere else down the road.
And I will mention, and why I thought this was important. We report all of this in our annual financial report in the back. And it's great information, but when we're reviewing that report, we don't spend a lot of time on our data and statistics. So that's where I pulled a lot of that information out of.
Good analytics, thank you.
Great. Okay, so sort of launching into fiscal year 2017, we're not done. We're scrubbing, we're getting our projects done. We're hoping you see that as we report things to you in news and notes. Really, I'd say we've done a much better job at making sure that things are getting done. We do have, we added a lot of positions that didn't come online, and we knew that would create some lapse salary. We've worked very hard to keep departments responsible and accountable for spending the money in the budget for what it was intended for, and monitoring and tracking that, and starting those projects and engaging in those projects to complete them on time. So they have been focuses. Now things happen, and things, and really where we focused on is the things within our control, not the things that are not within our control. And I think we've done a really good job operationally. But there will be capacity that's going to roll back into fund balance, in some part due to, the fact that we did not fill all of our positions at the start of the year. And we knew that, and we talked about that. We also, when we approved the fiscal year 17 budget, as we went through that last balancing project process, it took all the contingency out of the budget. And I was comfortable with that, and you gave me some authority to use lapse salary in ways to accommodate that sometimes things happen that we haven't budgeted for. I was also required to report to you how that lapse salary was used. And there was sort of a 6 months and 6 months, if you recall. And the good news is we didn't spend anything in the first 6 months, which is why you never saw a report. But as things happen, we've had a couple. And so this is my official report. If you want it to be official outside of a PowerPoint, I'm happy to do that as well. But so gave you a little bit of detail about what the authority was that you gave me, which was could spend 100 in the first 6 months and then 100 in the second 6 months, and to report in the 50,000 increments. So we had one in February. We had a substantial unscheduled repair to a fire vehicle that cost us $25,000. You may be aware that we started experiencing some vandalism and some issues in our parks, so we changed out the locks and went ahead and decided to do that with all of our parks. So now there's magnetic locks on our bathrooms that we can program to open and close to save ourselves from the damage that was being done. And so that we felt that was a very legitimate expense to go ahead and spend. And then our police in-car cameras is significantly over budget. And I'll have to credit Chief Andrews. She came in and scrubbed the process. Perhaps found again, unfortunately, we really probably hadn't done our due diligence when we made a quote. And you should have been reading about that. She tested multiple systems. She evaluated. She looked at them all and made the best long-term decision. And we felt that was appropriate and necessary, not only for the protection of our officers, but for our citizens. And I don't think any of us want to say we didn't record it because our cameras were broken. So that project will be complete and done by the end of June. So that is really what we spent out of our lap salary this year.
Cameras expenses over our budgeted, or is only 61?
Well, I've taken it from lap salary money and moved it to a budget item in the operations section.
We had an line item.
We did. We had one for about $159,000, and we're spending closer to $210.
Okay, so this was beyond.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Delta.
Okay, this is all
Yes.
Delta.
And so that's really what we've spent, where we've taken it from our personnel to our operations lines. And again, we've really put sort of a high standard of what we're going to consider. It's not a slush fund is really what I'm kind of saying there.
What's the process if council has ideas of other things we want to do? Do we run it by you, the council?
I don't listen to you.
What?
I don't listen to you.
Discussion item.
It's discussion item.
It's got round table.
Round table.
Okay, good.
That's actually probably a great place to do that.
Yes.
So.
Put it on the record.
But I will tell you, in all seriousness, one of the, as we've been working with the departments through the budget this year, again, another level of, I'll call it kind of do your job. We're really trying to make sure budget departments feel they manage their budget, they have what they need, but you have to be responsible for it too. And one of those things that we've talked with the departments about is you really should have made a lot of effort to forecast and think about what you need throughout the next year, not say, oops, I didn't think about this. That's what we want our department heads to do, to really be thinking long term. So if you just decide you want it, it's going to be a little bit tougher than if it's just something you could not have prepared for. We have not arbitrarily established department budgets. They've played a role in every step of this process and having the opportunity to request and justify what they think they need. Doesn't mean everything will be requested, but really making sure we as a management team understand the context of the requests, what the impacts are, so that we can evaluate and make best decisions to put into that budget balance proposal.
One thing to add about lap salary is you probably should treat the usage of it in the same way as your fund balance and kind of focus on one-time expenses, because think about what lap salary really represents. It represents a vacant position, but it's a routine expense that will likely be there next year that you need to account for. So just keep that in mind as you guys might think of ideas. Probably should try to stay focused on really these one-time solutions and emergency fixes.
And Jeannie's right. If a department head came to me and said, I want to add $50,000 of cost that's going to occur every year, that's not sustainable. So that's not the kind of thing that you're going to see being approved out of a lap salary request. So the lap salary handles things that change from a personnel expense to a operating expense, stuff, not people. There's a couple other kinds of budget adjustments that do go on sort of behind the scenes that, just while we're talking about this, thought it was important to touch base in. And it's what I call personnel-like expenses. So the best example is if you end up needing to contract for some professional services that normally a staff member would do, that either the position's vacant or the workload capacity just isn't there. Perfect example is the peer review of the IT project that we used some of the IT vacant or lap salary for that professional service. It would be if we had to hire some laborers to help us do some of our landscaping stuff because we have some vacancies on our public works. So professional services that meet the needs of things that staff would do if they could. So there is a couple of them there, but they're happening as a part of just our management of the budget. We used, some monies for assessment centers this year to make sure we're getting the right people in our jobs. We had some support for Courtney as she was recruiting for some of her positions for the flexibility analysis that you've seen. Others, we've talked about boatloads of scanning that we just fall behind on because we don't have the staff to do that. So we're trying to get some of that done.
How much did I'm trying to figure out, how does this relate to lap salary? The question is, how much was there in lap salary?
We don't have that answer yet. We took a forecast at 6 months and project what we think will be available. So, for example, we didn't hire a police officer for the first 6 months, so you can roughly calculate that to a number, and we know that there would be that lap salary available.
So how much was all of this stuff, this and not everything else?
Have not calculated it up that way, so that would be something we could work on to do.
Yes, I can provide that if that's necessary.
So I guess what I'd expect is these four things and whatever else cost $100,000, but their lap salaries of $300,000. We used none in the first half. We used these three, that you already labeled on the earlier slide. We use those, and then you have these items. Refresh me, is the ordinance this 100, is that on above and beyond any personnel-like expenditures that you?
I don't know that we made it that specific.
Because it doesn't, I don't know what the math is here. So, yeah, so you've almost used up the 100 here.
Mm-hmm.
And so where's this money coming from?
It's just part of our operating budget. So yes, it's in personnel expense. I think what I'm saying is there's still personnel expenditures. We just process them differently.
These are all unbudgeted?
They were all unbudgeted.
Okay. I guess I'd like to find out what we have the ordinance. That first slide before this looked like everything was kosher. And then we have this, which is above and beyond the 100. So
I understand and happy to get you those numbers.
Okay.
I think what Martha is saying is those items are like personnel expenses. It's just they're labor workforce related items. It's just they are contracted services, they are professional services, they are things meant to do the work and labor of people. And so she's saying that they're like services and personnel, so she's not including them in that first slide.
I got that. I'm just wondering, what is...
Are we staying within our rules?
Yeah.
And I understand completely, and happy to provide that. I'm not worried that we violated the rules. Those are not those significant that it would have changed the rules. But I understand, and we can get you the numbers for sure.
Okay.
And remember that, well, to further explain what the ordinance says with 100 and 100, it actually frames it in the way that in the first 6 months she gets 100, then she gets an additional 100. So she hasn't used the 100 in the first 6 months. She gets an additional 100, and it totals up to 200 by that period of time.
Oh, to prevent using a lot in the beginning.
Correct.
So it's to be spread out. So it's really 200, so I doubt she's exceeded that.
Okay, so maybe that's the answer.
But I still don't mind providing those numbers. The purpose for putting this in is so that you do have the appreciation for how we're using the budget for the purposes that we've intended. So we'll be happy to provide that additional information for that.
I think I like the question that Mark asked about how much lab salary is not for anything, but just because after some time, the lab salary, will keep decreasing because we are hiring people. We won't have that luxury anymore as we keep, finishing up our number of personals and keep up to the staff. Are we? That's.
Yeah, and we're forecasting. It's another one of those numbers that we can tell you exactly what the number is at the end of the year, but it's why we're keeping track, one, for a policy like this. And it'll change because we are forecasting, and people, even outside of new positions, people quit, people start, salaries change, so those things, yes.
So by end of the year, like a physical year, if at least we know that's added bonus that these things can just get.
It is something that you experience every year to some very degree. It just depends on your volume of turnover from one year to the next. And I've seen since the economic decline, I've seen it go down where people were staying in their jobs, and now we have a better economy, and it's definitely gone up, and turnover has obviously gone up. People moving around more, better potential opportunities elsewhere. So you're going to see something every year. In this case, it returns to fund balance, and it's something you get to reappropriate for your following year, or depending on your growth in new revenues.
Okay. All right, and then the third example of I'll say the flexibility in the budget that you give me as a town manager is like project expenditure adjustments. So this is so that you don't have to deal with these things that you've already approved, projects or authorizations you've already made, but sometimes things cost more, sometimes things cost less. And so we've given you, two examples here. Finally, the Duke Progress Energy Project will not roll, and it cost us less. So we had some savings there, but the Morrisville Parkway mast arms cost us a lot more than what we budgeted back in 2003. I don't know.
Talking about the lights.
Yes. We robbed from Peter to pay Paul for those two projects that council had authorized. Another example was our PSMS roof. There's money in the budget this year to replace that roof. When Chris Lennon went to look, he evaluated, and we didn't need to replace to extend the life as long as we expected. But the police department renovations, as we designed that, really recognized how bad the lighting was in that building. So we moved some of the money set aside really for the same building to put it where it could be best put to use. Fiscally responsible, the renovations project would have suffered if the lighting was not also resolved. Any questions on budget adjustments? So I think, Mayor, what I'll do is I will go ahead and, outside of a PowerPoint, I'll make a formal report and include some of those other items, just a memo to council at some point in the budget process, so that's fully out there. Thank you.
Excuse me. At the last meeting, we talked about the IT rollout of the core system. So we could potentially need professional services if the staff is, overloaded with work. Is that something that we're...
Well, that's probably a timing thing that we'll get to in a few minutes. So, okay. I'm going to turn it over to Jeannie for a few minutes to talk about her preliminary revenue forecast for fiscal year 18.
Okay. Hey, everybody. Back again. This is such fun time for me. So what I want to do with you I do actually mean that.
That's why it's funny.
Y'all can keep all the other stuff you assign me. Just let me do budget all day long. So I want to give you just a feel tonight of where we've landed, and you kind of will hear a little bit of the same stuff that I kind of spoke to you about at retreat. But I want to give you a feel for the revenue environment right now. So again, I'm going to tell you, we've got a positive economy. I tend to wait till I hear information from the League of Municipalities. They always give us this report about the economy, about these state distributed tax revenues and where they're headed and how they're going to grow. And they had a great report from Dr. Walden from North Carolina State. And things are headed in the right direction, but of course, the League of Municipalities always takes great pause anytime there's any political environmental activity. They tend to take a pretty cautious approach. But generally, it is good news. More importantly, our tax base growth is trending at 4%. Now, typically, I budget around 3% as a conservative number. But because of things that have occurred and the economy being positive, the revaluation, we're going to have a pretty good year going into 2018. So 4% is really where that tax-based growth is trending. And just things are getting built. I mean, we see it. We see it in our commercial permits. They're just through the roof. So I usually budget around $360,000. They're above $800,000 in just commercial permits right now. So there's a lot of activity going on. The thing that we probably need to keep in mind is that we still are trying to understand that impact for the builders' exclusions. So we get a word of caution from the tax assessor at this particular time of year because that's something new and he's not sure where that's going to potentially land. And that's something that the builders have to ask for. So it's when they have activities, they're building something, they're purchasing property, they have the right to go and ask for that exclusion. So it gets pulled out of that revenue pool at that point. So right now it looks like it's manageable. Obviously, we're trending above that 3% mark, so it looks like we're good. But he keeps us clued in from this point on, so he could potentially kind of drive it somewhere else if he sees a trend. So just giving you kind of a warning on that.
So have we had anybody do the exemption as for it? Yeah.
I can ask him for the list. So he has projected about $12 million of our tax base that is projected towards builder exclusions right now. So I can give you, sure he can give me a list of who that is.
With home builders and apartments also?
Yes.
Does it work the same for apartments? I mean, do they wait till they got an occupancy?
I think it could be any type of building, property purchase, anything that's changing in a piece of property that they can ask for an exclusion. So it has to be an improvement.
And it's so that if there's raw land that someone's building an apartment on, we still get the tax on that raw land, correct? We just don't get tax on the improvements until it's occupied.
That's correct.
Yeah, I think that's right, Mayor.
Correct. That's always the raw land, only on improvements.
It's delaying.
It's the new development.
Delaying the additional value by
right.
That's
6 months or a year. Or
only when the CO is given, then the taxes start on it. So ad valorem is definitely as a result of tax-based growth and because of our collection rate being 99 point something %, we have a great collection rate in Morrisville. Our ad valorem revenue is trending above 3% as well. So that's great news
Sales tax is exceeding our expectations. It's averaging month to month as compared to last year about 7%. Now, again, that one can be sensitive to changes in consumer confidence, but consumer confidence is very high right now. Again, it's a positive economy, and we're seeing the results of that in several of our revenues that really make a difference. So as I mentioned, commercial permits are up, and looking forward, we're still anticipating additional development commercially, and we're going to see some residential development as a result of some of your decisions that you've made recently. Utility franchise is one of those quirky revenues. It's going to be kind of a static this year between this year and next year. Weather has been great, but weather affects this one quite a bit. Now, Morrisville tends to have the luxury because of its growth being so high. We're adding new addresses, new people. It can counteract any kind of weather sensitivity for this particular source. But this is one of our major sources, so that's why we always tend to talk about it. It's probably your third to fourth largest. Revenue fee, or user fees, we're just basically going to right size. That's kind of the direction that we're going this year. We're not adding any major significant revenues, but just making sure that they're market comparable, that they're on point, making just slight adjustments. So I'm kind of transitioning into really, what our revenue strategy is going forward. I'm looking at 2018. So we are really going to leverage the growth in revenues. So again, I mentioned that we are running really good year over year. We're probably looking at 4 to 5% revenue growth year over year as the economy has gotten better. We are budgeting at the current tax rate at this point. We're going to still hold that line with sales tax and taking that a conservative approach. So we're going to listen to the League of Municipalities at this point, and they're anticipating next year we could see about a 4.25% percentage increase. But see, taking a conservative approach really sets us up well to make sure that we're going to end in a positive way in managing and controlling our expenses and conserving our revenues, or budgeting our revenues conservatively. We're going to be able to establish some ability to be able to grow and continue to add to our capacity. It is one, if we wanted to do something, we could potentially take a little more risk on, but again, it's sensitive to economic swings and shifts within a year. Development fees, we always take a conservative approach because of the type of structure this particular revenue source is. It's unpredictable in nature. It's dependent on developers coming in and wanting to develop in our community and the timing in which they want to process the site plan. It can be a big time period, a big gap between when they start the site plan review and when they start construction. So we tend to take what I call a baseline average, and it's just enough to make sure that this is what we absolutely have to have. And everything about that is bonus. So in this year, we're definitely going to have a positive year because commercial permits are up. And I usually apply what's called a 3-year rolling average to kind of neutralize the swings and shifts and variances from year over year for these revenues. Stormwater ERU fee, we're staying the same. We're not proposing any changes. The general fund subsidy to the stormwater is going to be comparable. And we're going to continue that 1 cent on the tax rate that we talked about last year for that roadway and transportation capital reserve fund. So that's a part of our concept or our strategy. No big user fee changes. And we're going to really leverage our strong fund balance position to help us get some of these projects done. Okay, any questions? Again, I hope that gives you a feel for where we're at and where we're going.
In terms of our revenue forecast, I mean, are we still a ways off before we forecast, potential? Well, we got development occurring in the McCrimmon Corridor with the Wake Competition Center. If that builds, and then once that gets constructed, property tax space, and then other things, are we a few years away from forecasting those? Yes. I mean, that's a ways away, right? But it's potential, tremendous.
It's potential. So probably, in talking with planning, we were around that 2019 number, but we probably really should be around that 2020, 2021. So that's the latter part of our 5-year picture. to be conservative. Because again, that's opening up area for new development. The developers have got to be interested to come in. That's the unpredictable source. So that's that development fee unpredictable area of revenues. But it is certainly something you should be considering as you look forward. Great question.
So now we're going to talk about personnel and the personnel requests that I'd like to share that have been presented and that I think have merit for this year. There are 3 firefighters. Remembering when you bring on 1, you bring on 3 because of our different shifts. And this is related to the Quint concept implementation plan. And Todd's going to, in a short while here, give you a sort of a refresh update on that. And Chief Jenkins and Chief Dooley are going to come in and listen and get updated as well on that one. But the general concept is we have typically brought on a truck and then brought on 3 firefighters. What we've found is that the way the fire department is structured, we don't have drivers for the truck. And so there's lots of time lost and usage of those vehicles. They're out of service because we don't have drivers because of the time it takes to train. So the proposal is to front those firefighter additions rather than put them after the truck, so that we are able to train the existing firefighters up to drive trucks, and then when they are ready to drive a truck, there's spots for firefighters. So that is the core premise of that, and Todd's going to talk a little bit more about that in concept in a few minutes. The next position request is a transportation planner. I don't really know how to describe the amount of workload we have on Ben Howe. And we try to hide from you how much time and effort he's putting in, the amount of meetings, the regular work on top of his TIA work, the plan review, the projects he's helping manage for the planning department, the transit, which will continue to grow for him. He is never a complainer, but if there's really any part of our operation that I think we don't have enough people, it's that transportation section of our planning department. This would be somebody that would do some of the more routine daily operational tasks that allow us to use Ben when we need him the most, which is his knowledge and expertise and his relationship building. So it's an entry-level planner position, but I consider this one pretty critical.
Is it a transportation planner or a transportation engineer?
It's a transportation planner.
Because we don't have a transportation engineer, because that's where we are missing out on the TIA and other stuff. Right?
And I will tell you, we talked at length about that, and Courtney worked with Ben to evaluate what our needs are, and the work that we're talking about is not engineering work. Now, that does not mean we may not need an engineer as well at some point in the future. And Ben already works very closely with our engineering department, but this was the recommendation that also came from the planning department. So they vetted those options.
Okay, because my only reasoning, because every time we get into an SUP or anything, the word TIA and the planning, because we could not justify or even put Ben on the stand because he's not a certified engineer to talk about TIA. We needed an engineer.
One of the things we have also talked about is, our transportation engineers are hatch-mot, and ways to use them differently is one of the things they talked about how to fulfill those needs differently. Okay. But I did rely a lot on the planning department recommendation for a planner versus an engineer. And I believe Rich was also consulted as a part of this conversation.
Okay, not just because the word, if it Okay.
Okay. The third is unique because it's a unit, and a K-9 and another K-9 officer. We ran Bruno ragged. We will do the same thing with Argo, and more than that, it is the delays, because right now they don't work 24/7. Those needs are there 24/7, and we've documented and recognized. Sometimes hours can go by before we get a K-9, because if Carl and Arco are not available to work, we're calling in other resources, and then we're just waiting in line. And so it hurts our citizens. It hurts our ability to follow up on crimes, that we just don't have full capacity when these types of services are called for. So, those are the personnel requests for the year that I would like to make for the budget this year. We can have Todd present the quints now, or we could talk about the other two. What's your preference for? I don't know if you have any questions or comments about these requests.
I do.
How
We
did
just
I
ask
know
our
that?
questions, then we can go under.
So how about if we talk about the two, and then we'll come back to the firefighters? Would that be okay? Okay, thank you.
Martha, do you have an idea how much Bruno got as far as seizures, money?
I don't offhand, but I think that is something, you are talking Bruno.
Bruno.
Okay.
Well, figuring he has the history, so I'm
Yes.
just curious as to, when Bruno got up and running, how much money did he get on, for the town? I'm
Okay.
assuming that money comes to the town.
Yeah,
Once it's-
there's a complicated seizure forfeiture process, but I do know we have those records. I'm sure the police must keep track of the seizures.
Okay.
Follow up? Yes, sir?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Justify a better ROI.
Well, just a talking point if someone says, why are we hiring another one? And we can say, Bruno got $100,000 worth of
Yeah.
cash
Another
and FTP
thing with the canine unit, being honest with you, it's a much more expensive police unit to fund, because the vehicle has to be at a different level, the additional equipment for the second unit. However, and Chief Andrews and I have already talked about this, there's also some grant opportunities, as we know, to help fund the purchase of at least the canine part of that unit that we talked about exploring if this request would be approved.
Is the additional vehicle in the budget?
This would be the personnel port, and then all of the additional capital and operations would also be programmed in as a budget request.
So it says extended workload capacity, but we run on like 3 shifts, right? So what kind of shifts will they run? Because we can't.
So currently,
24/7 on 2 shifts. Yeah.
Currently, and I couldn't tell you the rhyme or reason by how it's done, but Carl works nights sometimes, some days sometimes, and then male shifts sometimes to try to be here at different times. Also a lot of training, ongoing, regularly with a unit that takes him out of service. There are some calls for service. We provide a lot of support to RDU. Again, the value for us is some of that share of that seizure and that forfeiture that we get. So there is, I'll say, some compensation for that. But I can get you more information on that. I don't know how that gets done.
And you said something like when ARCO is not available, what is the additional resources like from our
We
care?
sort of call into Wake County and try to get another K-9 unit to come and assist us.
Not to say like when we get a number figured out, and what is that additional a la carte service like when we pull in, how many times did we pull in the last 1 year?
Do we get charged for that if we use another agency's hand?
No, I think it's part of reciprocal, but again, I'll change.
Yeah, so how many times did we really pull out of them? So at least we know what are we.
I will find out. Okay. Any questions about transportation planner?
I do, and not to belay it, but, so there are two different positions. Is there somebody who does both? An engineer and a planner?
Engineers are really very specially skilled.
So there's nobody that crosses over and does both?
I think everybody kind of does a little bit of everything. It's just the type of probably education and professional degree and the types of things you work on primarily.
Is the engineer paid more than start
Much
off
more.
with? Okay.
So I'm going to say, like, how much is the cost difference at all if we go? Because I'd rather see an engineer in town, so at least.
We talked about using it for also some of the mundane clerical stuff that now
For Ben Howell.
Benjamin is doing. So I wouldn't want to pay an engineer to do that stuff.
No, not the clerical, because every time, the reason I ask for an engineer, because we offshoot to a third party every time we need anything. So if we had an engineer in-house, so we can do a lot of the stuff like transportation engineer in-house stuff and save more money. That was more of like long-term that I was looking at.
So I think there's two issues, really. One is we have one staff member that is doing two people's jobs, right? Doing the work of two people in a planning position. And the request is to have another planning staff member added. What you're recommending and I'm inquiring about is something I've wondered too, is we're doing a lot of contract services. So do we have enough activity in the engineering area to warrant having an in-house staff member for engineering? Not replacing the planner from the staff member that's doing two jobs, but converting that from a contract to a staff.
Kimberly Horn, we always consult for every small things, and if we have that can offset some of the workload of Benjamin
So Kimberly Horn is not a transportation planner or engineer.
Or like what are the like for the
Attach
road?
mod, and that's an on-call service. So the fact that we have on-call services that outside of, I think, really what you're talking about, meet the needs for reviewing those things that require a transportation engineer review. And the on-call works so that we only pay for when we need it. With the transportation engineer, you'd be paying as a full employee, and then we would have to sort of create the additional work that's in there. Now, there are other smaller projects that we contract out individually, but that's on an ad hoc basis, and that changes as our workload changes for those major projects. We're in a feast right now because we've been doing that a lot, but it's not always that way. Let me bring you some more information on how we use transportation engineer services as a contrast to the request. Would that help?
Yeah,
Okay.
Something like a crossbreed we are looking, that's all it is, so that you can better justify, that's all.
What you're saying is that you see more of a need for the planning support for the planner and then still using the on-demand, engineering.
Yes, I do, and based on my discussions with the conversation. Now, we're pretty fortunate that Rich, while he's not a transportation engineer, is pretty savvy, and he provides invaluable assistance on those projects. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Todd. Welcome, Chiefs. Glad to have you here. You want to come on up and sit at the table?
We like the hot seats.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to provide the Quint refresh. I'm very aware that most of you have heard and seen this information enough. You could lead this discussion.
He's only lighting up like a...
I will go through it quickly, but feel free to ask questions as you go through it, or at the end you have an opportunity to ask questions as well. But I do want to just overview the threats, the 4 levels of threats that we face in the fire service here in Morrisville, and how those levels of threat relate to the fire equipment and staffing that's needed to respond initially to start incident mitigation efforts. It's important to realize that we're talking about starting those efforts, not this is the number of folks we need to complete the operations. We'll review again what the service level goals are for fire protection. We'll talk about what is the Quint concept and how it benefits the citizens of Morrisville. And then we'll give you an update of where we're at in the transition. But first, let me just talk about the fire department has conducted a threat assessment for the entire city. Every single structure and every type of an emergency that can occur here has been evaluated, and we've grouped those in one of these 4 categories, whether it be a low risk, a moderate risk, a significant risk, or a maximum risk. Low risk as it applied, it requires the least amount of resources to start mitigation efforts. A moderate risk, you see the example there, residential structure fire, and we're talking about a typical 2,000 square foot home. It's in that level of risk where 80% of the fire fatalities occur annually in the United States. So certainly that's of a concern. And then we have hundreds of significant risk, such as apartment complexes and things of that nature. And we have quite a few number of structures that fall in the maximum risk. The good thing about the significant risk and the maximum risk categories is that most of those structures we have a high level of fire and life safety measures, such as sprinklers. So the likelihood of these events occurring are less. The service level goals for fire protection is for the town, and this is in very non-technical terms, is to respond with enough equipment and staffing to start mitigation efforts for a moderate risk. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, every time you have a fire, we see, 50 firefighters out there. And you might really, that might be true. But keep in mind, usually more than half of those are surrounding communities helping us, because what we're talking about here is that initial response. We're a paramilitary organization. We fight fires, for example, in waves of attack. So we're talking about that first wave. Our mutual aid partners in Con really are intended to help with the second, third wave of attack. Now, currently, we have a gap in not being able to meet the critical tasking to affect the desired outcome on moderate risk. And so that's really what we're trying to accomplish, is get to that level of staffing where we can affect the outcome. In very simple terms, if we have a burning building, when we get there, we want to stop that fire in its tracks. We want to remove the threat of dangers, threat of life, hazard to life. We want to save anybody that's at risk. But we want to stop that fire in its tracks and minimize the damage that's occurring as a result of that. If we're going to a cardiac arrest, we want to get there in a time where we can start basic life support and advanced life support so we can resuscitate a patient. That's basically our goals. So looking at the different levels of risk, again, low risk, and we use the example of a vehicle fire, typically as a single company response with full personnel. And you can look here and see the different critical tasks that need to be done to provide a favorable outcome. Then we move to the moderate risk. Again, we use an example of a house fire. You can see that we really need 15 people to assemble very quickly and then accomplish these various tasks so we can affect the outcome. But also, it's more than just the desired outcome. When you don't assemble this much people, the crews that are there, they try to compensate, and they try to accomplish more than really what they're capable of. So there is an increased risk of safety to our firefighters when we're operating below these levels. Significant risk, again, you can see we need 26 people to show up, start working. and maximum risk is 38. But and again, we're not trying to staff at those levels. As the former fire chief, because most of these types of buildings, again, have sprinkler systems, and they're less likely to occur, I feel like that is an acceptable risk for us to take. Our service level goals, again, we want to respond with enough equipment and staffing to start mitigation efforts for a moderate threat. Right now, we're not able to do that. We do rely on our automatic aid to try to help fill that gap, but they don't get here quick enough, and that's in part because of the distance they travel and the problems or the challenges we have with our communications center, which we are working on that. And then the other part of it is, and these are goals that were established many years ago, but the other second part of that goal is to have a crew available to be able to respond to a simultaneous call. That's a big issue because approximately 20% of our calls occur simultaneously. And so the Quint concept is a way that we can meet that first goal, and we can meet it in a way that will require less equipment and less people. For example, the traditional fire protection model that we were operating under for many years required that we have 7 fire trucks, and these are 7 fire trucks that are capable of fire suppression capabilities, and we need 25 people on duty a day. That's one shift, and we have 3 shifts, so that's 75 for all 3 shifts. So the Quint concept helps us meet that first goal. What it does not help us meet is the second goal. That is the one goal we're giving up with the Quint concept. But I'm happy to report that for many years, the way we've been meeting this goal, for example, if we get a house fire right now, we're going to deplete all of our resources, every single one of them. But at the same time, we're going to call a neighboring fire department to respond to Morrisville to stage in one of our fire stations, and they're going to be that crew that's available to respond to a simultaneous call. So we're meeting the goal, we're just not meeting with our own crew and our own equipment. And again, I feel like that's an acceptable risk. So the question is, what is the Quint concept? Well, let me just say that a traditional fire truck, which we call an engine or a pumper, it has 4 components. It has a water tank, it has a water pump, it has a complement of fire hose, and ground ladders. A Quint, in the Quint concept, it is a staffing and apparatus plan. The Quint itself, the apparatus, has 5 capabilities. It has all the 4 that a traditional engine has, and in addition to that, it has a hydraulic aerial device. So it has an increased capability. And because of that increased capability, the Insurance Service Office recognizes that, and what they say is when you operate under an all-Quint concept, which is what we're transitioning to, you don't have to have as much equipment, and you don't have to have as many people. We're going to give you credit for that, and I'll explain that as we go through. But it is important at this point to emphasize the Quint concept, it is an equipment and staffing plan, and if we couldn't do both, we shouldn't try to do one. Because you're going to see as we go through this, if we don't have both, it changes the model. Traditional fire protection, which we operated under for many years, identified we needed 7 fire apparatus that have fire suppression capabilities, 25 firefighters, and of course we have a battalion chief, and that's included in that 25 firefighters. That's per shift. And we have 3 shifts. What the Quint concept offers is that we only need 3 fire trucks that are fire suppression capable. Now, if you recall, there was a time when we used the long-range financial plan. I think it went about 50 years out. We had a plan to hire 75 firefighters. And, the fire side, we was like, we're not sure this is ever going to happen. So we started researching, is there a better way? And the Quint concept is considered an innovative approach. We started researching that. We researched every fire department in the country that operated or operates under the Quint concept, and we learned a lot from the departments that were successful at it, and we probably learned more from the departments that were not successful. What we learned is that the Quint itself, just responding with one Quint as the primary response was not cost effective. And that's why we show the 3 Quints and then what we call 3 quick response vehicles or rescues. We use those words interchangeably. Some of you have questioned me about why this is a medical, why did this big fire truck respond to this medical call? It's a good question. But with the Quint concept, we have a way for vehicles that don't cost as much. They're more economical on fuel. They don't require as many firefighters to staff that can respond to those medical calls. Today, the fire department's responding to about 50% of their calls are medical. All of our neighbors around us, 70 to 80% of their calls are medical. What we have a way that as our population increases, so our medical percentage calls, we have a way that will minimize the cost of providing those services with these quick response units. So the Quint concept is, 3 aerial devices or 3 Quints and 3 quick response units. And what we're doing here is reducing the number of trucks that are required to have fire suppression capability. So that, and you'll see in a minute how that reduces the overall cost. So we can operate with 19 firefighters per shift and still get the same credit under the traditional fire protection model that require 25. If you look at the next slide where it does the component comparison, if you look at the left, yes, sir.
When you say like 3 Quints means like at 3 stations, or like, can you clarify like 1 Quint for 1 station? Is that what it is?
Yeah, you're a little bit ahead of me there, but I see what you're saying. Let me get to that. I'll explain that.
No.
Give me 1 second. If you look at that slide you're on there, that one there at the top left-hand corner, when we had our last ISO inspection in 2004, they recommended that we have 4 engines. That's, we have 3 engines and 1 reserve, and you can see there's 7 trucks total, and that we have 25 folks on duty per day. That was back in 2004.
We have more people now, right?
We have a lot of everything now.
That's the point.
We have more people. We have more buildings. The good news is that this evaluation is based on how much area you can serve from a station. Our area hasn't grown significantly, even though we built it up. It's just not spread out. So, we're going to be evaluated in 2018 again. And if we were still on the fire protection model, that information probably would change. But in 2004, if you look at that top right-hand slide, this is how we were operating. We had 13 people on duty per day total, and we had 8 fire trucks. We had 1 truck that was a tanker. It's a specialized piece of equipment that we use 25% of our fire district. This is not town limits we're talking about, but fire district outside of town limits. Is areas that's not served by hydrants. So when there's a fire there, we have to drive. Back then, we drove this specialized truck with a big tank of water to it. We have to transport the water, and we have to set up what they call a mobile water supply. One of the things we did with the last engine we replaced, we had it spec'd out to have an oversized tank. It still functions as an engine, but it just has a larger tank. And we were able to reduce the number of fleet we have today by 1 because of the way we ordered this truck. So we have reduced the fleet down to 7. Then we skip down to the bottom left here where you have what we call the minimum Quint staffing. And again, this is operating a Quint out of each station, so that's 3 Quints total, having 1 reserve Quint, and then 3 rescues and a battalion chief. Still 7 vehicles, but we're not having 7 vehicles that have to be fire suppression capable. And again, I'll show you a little later how that helps reduce the cost. This is what we need to the minimum level. Right now, we have 2 Quints, and we have 15 people on duty per day. And we'll show you the problems we're having with the current staffing. But then the full staffing on the right bottom, what the difference is between this and minimum, right now today, And even at minimum, our rescue companies, 2 of them are out of service 90% of the time. Only one stays in service most of the time. So at those stations, or that station where the Quint is, that Quint's running 100% of the calls. When we researched this and figured out a model that would work for our town, the plan was that the Quints would run 50% or less of the calls. Those Quints are much larger. They cost more to operate them, and we recognize, we couldn't afford to run them on every call. What has happened as we've implemented this Quint concept, we've kept pushing out the staffing. We kept replacing the vehicles. Our Quints are coming in when we replace a vehicle. We're not ordering it in advance or any special order. It's when a vehicle we have is scheduled to be replaced, we replace it with a Quint. And we have 2 Quints now. So what we've learned is that the trucks don't hold up when they run all the calls. So it is important for those rescues to be available. And again, we'll talk about that more. The difference between the minimum Quint staffing and the full Quint is that the staffing level compensates for vacancies. It compensates when people are not at work. So 3 people are allowed to be off. In this case, with the 19, if 3 people are allowed to be off, every single truck's in service 100% of the time. Today, when we allow the maximum people off, it takes companies out of service. And 80% of the time, we're not at full staffing. 80% of the time, we have 2 to 3 people not at work. And it's approved. It's vacation, it's family leave, it's military leave, it's whatever. What the full Quint staffing plan does is it allows us to operate all those vehicles 100% of the time. So you see a diagram there of minimum Quint staffing. We don't have this today. The top right-hand fire truck, it's not a Quint, it's a pumper. But this would reflect what we need for minimum Quint staff. I want to point out that the positions on these trucks, several of those are skilled positions. The red helmet, for example, that's a captain. That's the supervisor of the fire station. They're responsible for the fire station. They directly supervise the people on that truck. The black helmet to the right of that red helmet is an engineer, or it's the driver of the truck. Again, this is a skilled position that requires years of training to get to that level. When you look below that first Quint and you see the Squad 1, the yellow helmet there is a junior officer. We call that a lieutenant. Again, a skilled position. And even the position to the right of there is an engineer. It's a driver. So again, 4 of those positions at each station are skilled positions and require specialized training to get to that level. If you look to the next slide, what you see is our current staffing. So the top right fire truck, again, it's not a Quint. It is scheduled to be replaced this year. It was deferred from last year. And we are planning to replace that with a Quint. So at that point, we'll have all the Quints that we need. Then when you look over to the Squad 1 on the left bottom truck, notice that those 2 positions are not, you can't, the one on the left is not skilled. And so is the one on the black one on the right is also not skilled. So we haven't promoted people to those positions yet. What typically happens is we take an engineer off of the Quint and we put them in charge of that quick response unit, and they have to drive and be in charge of that truck. And so that's not ideal because, they're talking on the radio, and if they're not talking on the radio, they're telling the firefighter it is talking on the radio what to say, so they might as well be talking on the radio. So it's not an ideal situation. But then what happens is 80% of the time, 2 to 3 of these people are not at work. So you can see what happens. Squad 1 is the first thing that goes out of service. And right now, Squad 1 is only in service 10% of the time. Part of it's because we don't have enough people, but part of it's because we don't have the skilled positions we need to operate these vehicles.
Skilled personnel, right?
Skilled personnel, yes, thank you.
Because each of these you have to multiply by 3. This is just one.
That is correct. Yeah.
showing us right now.
Right. And keep in mind, we're not showing the battalion chief here, but, but there is one battalion chief per shift as well. If you look at the typical staffing slide, 80% of the time, this is what it looks like. We've got the 3 quints, or the 2 quints that pump 3 in service 100% of the time. And we've got Rescue 2 in service probably 99% of the time, but with the normal people that are off, we have Squad 1 is only in service 10% of the time. So that means Ladder 1 is running, 90% of the calls, and that's not good for the longevity of that truck. It's not good for the operating costs of that truck. And if you look to the next slide at full staffing, what this allows us to do, it allows us to put promoted people in the right positions. It allows us to have the maximum amount of people off, which is 3, and operate every truck 100% of the time. The next slide shows the cost savings. If we were to purchase every truck needed for traditional fire protection, it's $5.5 million. If we were to purchase every truck needed for the Quint concept today, it's $5.1 million. So there's about a $400,000 savings. Then if we compare the minimum staffing needed for a Quint versus the traditional fire protection, which is 16 people versus 25, it's a $1.35 million savings. But then when we compare the full staffing at 19 with 25 required for traditional fire protection, it's $900,000. So we're avoiding a lot of personnel costs by not having to hire. We're saving a total of 18 positions we're never going to need to hire by going to the Quint concept. Again, some of you are around long enough. You remember that long-range plan, 75 firefighters on there, which total 36 more than what we had at the time. Now we've got it down to 18 total. The benefits to the Quint is that it helps us meet the critical tasking needed to address a moderate threat. It significantly improves the fireground capabilities of our equipment and personnel. And very importantly, it helps improve firefighter safety. It allows us the opportunity to avoid personnel costs by not having to hire as many people. And we can have some apparatus cost savings, and that only occurs if we can keep those special response units in service a high percentage of the time. If we don't, that model changes. And because of that, I'm going to give you an example. Ladder 2. That truck probably has less than 70,000 miles on it. We've rebuilt the engine, and we've replaced the engine. Now, part of that is some manufacturer defect we had to deal with, but part of it is many of those first 5 years or so of its life, it ran all the calls. So that's why when I say it's a staffing and an equipment plan, it's not one or the other. And then it does help us improve the ISO rating, which we're coming up in 2018 for evaluation. So let's talk about where we're at in the transition. In the last 4 years, we've hired 6 additional firefighters. We've completed the first phase of the staffing plan where we take these firefighter positions, we upgrade 3 of them to engineer, and we upgrade 3 of them to lieutenant. That's why if you go back to that slide where it shows the current staff and you see the skilled positions on Rescue 2. We're asking to move 3 firefighters up from fiscal year 19 to 18 because of some of the challenges we've had, and I'll explain those more in a minute. And we're also asking to complete at least the first leg of the second phase of staffing plan to equip the second rescue with engineer. Skip 3 years, and then we'll hire another 3 firefighters and complete the second phase of the staffing plan, upgrade a firefighter position to lieutenant, and then basically we'll do that same thing over again in 23 and 25 to complete the full staffing plan. The staffing request is coming to you a year early, primarily as a way to help meet the critical tasking needed to mitigate and start mitigation efforts for a moderate threat. It also will help increase the time that Squad 1 is in service. Currently it's at 10%. Again, part of that's because of normal leave that's approved But it also, the driver's position in our department is an organizational weakness. And that's primarily because our highest turnover rate occurs when an employee's been here 3 to 5 years, which is typically when you would start becoming a driver. And there's a lot of reasons why that's where our highest level of turnover is, but it is that. And that situation is so profound that in the almost 12 years I've been here, we've never, ever filled every driver position we've had available. So while we need these additional firefighters to meet critical tasking, we also need them to have a bigger pool to promote people from to help offset the higher turnover rate we're having. Because when somebody leaves that's in this position, again, 3 to 5 years to train them to that level. I mean, you can't take a rookie firefighter and train them to be a driver. It's just not possible. Officers that are on these trucks, that's a 5 to 7 year process. And then the last thing that I want to mention is this will help us continue to maintain internal promotions for skilled positions. Our fire department has hired a number of people since 1999 in skilled positions, and we do not have a good history of retaining those employees. In fact, there's only 2 that still work here today. We're hoping Chief Jenkins will improve that statistic, but he's got to be 5 years to move that needle. So, not trying to put any pressure on the Chief Jenkins. But we don't have a good history of hiring people from the outside in promoted positions. Again, a lot of reasons for that. I don't know if we're getting other people's trash or I don't know what the reason is. But anyway, happy to answer any questions. So, take that off the record.
So just to be clear, the 3 firefighter positions that was just previously noted in the overview budget is the same request.
It is.
But this is just more in-depth justification for, raising the level so that we can have adequate drivers, adequate skills, and a moderate threat coverage. Correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
I was just curious. I thank you for laying it out this way so we can see the ROI. I was also, just for my own knowledge, because it's been a while since we've seen this, do most towns of our size, does it just depend on whether they're using Quint or not, like towns of Morrisville size? I mean, are there any towns of our size that use the traditional? And I'm just
fire
curious.
departments across the country use the traditional fire protection model. There are very few that use the Quint. And I will say that as beneficial as the Quint is for us, it is not for everybody. For example, if we were City of Raleigh, no question we would not pursue the Quint because they have so many fire stations, the cost of those vehicles would be prohibitive. In our case, one of the things that make it ideal here is we're not growing out. We're growing up, and this Quint provides us a greater capability we need to deal with typical development we have today. Think of a Grace Park. You go to a business on the first floor that has a gas station at 3 o'clock in the morning. If that's a standalone building, that threat's a lot less. But when you got a gas leak, when you got 3 floors of residential above it, that's a whole different challenge. The Quint concept helps us meet that challenge. And again, it's not for everybody, but we really think it's perfect for our town because we're not growing out, we're growing up. And that gives us that increased capability. When we go to a fire, for example, every fire that I've ever been to where we had to use an aerial device, we needed 2. In the past, we've always relied on another fire department to provide that, which they're not always available. Sometimes they have their own emergencies they're dealing with. Now we have that own capability. We have 2 Quints now, and we don't have to rely on another fire department to provide that second aerial.
And you had necessary shifts to respond to like a fire emergency. I mean, even though Raleigh's a much bigger city, what happened there that was pretty scary was how this fire broke out. And there's some people are saying that it might have been because of the wood structure. I actually thought about that. I was driving on Morrisville Carpenter. I saw that one, I think it's a Kumon Center. It was a wood. It was looked like wood. And I thought, God, what if something caught fire and then fire spread, caught a lot of the residences and houses and things like that? Because it was amazing how quickly that fire spread from where it was all the way to where the League of Municipalities is all down that road. So this Quint concept would actually better prepare us to have those kind of shifts to deal with an emergency while not having to hire, 50, 60 more people.
You're correct. But at the same time, I don't want to mislead you to think that the Quint concept is going to help us effectively deal with those type of risks.
Okay, and that's just a one-time thing, but it just got me thinking. I never thought about fire emergency before, and when I saw that, I said something could have a fire in the middle of the night, and it could spread like 3 miles.
A building under construction like that is very vulnerable because the sprinkler system's not in place.
And we have a lot of construction going on in Morrisville, so.
Most of the buildings we have that are like that are already built, are sprinklered. There's not as many that's not, and that's going to help us. But you make a good point. Even a house fire we go to in most of our modern subdivisions, it's not just the one house that's the challenge. One house and it starts to ventilate. It's a serious threat to set multiple houses on fire. And
right.
So this Quint does help us address that.
Right, thank you.
Todd, I had some just personal number questions for you. So you said to go from the minimum to the maximum Quint, it's, I think I wrote it down, 48 to 57 to cover the 3 shifts. That was 16 and 19 times 3.
Yeah. What we need to do now, from this point we're at now, we need to hire 12 firefighters. And that'll give us 4 per shift. And we need to do the staffing and restructure plans to go with that. Hiring 12 more firefighters gives us the full Quint staffing plan.
But how does that compare? So our current count in the fire department, we have, and this is going off last year's budget, 49 full-time positions and another 18. You consider those part-time or volunteer?
So they're volunteers. Right. We don't consider them part-time. They're volunteers. And that program is going to be evaluated. We appreciate our volunteer program, but we've known this for a while. Most of the time they're available is at night. Unfortunately, most of our calls occur in the day. It has become a good recruitment program for us, but those are volunteers, and they come in when they can.
Are you setting those totally aside, those positions, as far as filling in the Quint concept?
That is correct. They have nothing to do with meeting our staffing needs.
So if then you go back to the 49, plus we're adding 3 this year, then you want to add another 9 on top of it, so then you're up to 61 or 2?
Yes.
I think I first heard of this concept probably 10 years ago when I first started here. And I always thought it was a wave of adding 3 at a time for 3 waves, for a total of 9. So when I read this, the second phase has caught me off guard, to be honest with you. I don't think I've ever read there was a second wave of an additional 9 on top of the original 9.
The numbers have never changed since we started Quint Concept. The phasing we talk about is just an internal promotion to get somebody from a firefighter to a skilled position.
But you're still asking in future years to add another 9.
In addition to these 3 this year.
Right.
These 3 get us to the minimum staffing plan for a Quint. Mm-hmm. And then additional years, those additional 9, which is 3 per shift, provides full staffing for a Quint.
I got it. I don't, whenever I thought of this concept, it was always 3 waves of 3.
Correct.
Over the years, not 6 waves of 3, which is what you're saying here. So
I don't know how we, where that got miscommunicated, but the number is, before we had a plan to hire 36 firefighters with the traditional fire protection. When I say a plan, it was in that long-range spreadsheet. When we went to the Quint concept, we reduced that to 18 total. So we've already hired 6.
So that was the reason you're saying we have 2 Quints in existence right now?
Well, we agreed that the Quints would come online when we have a vehicle that's scheduled for normal replacement. We're not changing our replacement schedule. It's just that when it's normally due for replacement, we'll replace it with a Quint. So the number of vehicles haven't changed. We are changing the types of vehicles.
And could you talk about Station 3 a little bit? I think it's one of these things where it's just kind of out of sight, out of mind. It's not something we're running into as you drive around town a whole lot. What is the what's the future of Station 3 with we're co-sharing with Cary? How does this concept work in with what their equipment is on that site? Are we two separate entities? Are we one combined station here? How does it work, if you could?
So our location at Cary Station 7, our Station 3, is temporary. There's no long-term plans to stay there. We do have land for a future Fire Station 3 in RTP. And there certainly is interest that we relocate that someday. Most of the Morrisville Fire District that's served by that area, Station 3, it's in Cary's ETJ. At some point, in every year, the fire departments meet to evaluate how much annexation has occurred. And when is it the right time to start planning the move out of that station? At some point, that enough land will be annexed that we will not be needed out there. And then, we can shift to provide concentrated fire protection in town as well as RTP, as long as you all agree to continue doing that. And, we get a pretty significant revenue source from Wake County to provide fire protection in the unincorporated area and RTP. So the long-term plans is to move out of that station into our own station. And the Quint, again, concept fits perfectly. But right now, they do function as one agency. For example, if we get a call from Station 3's district, we get a complement of care resources responding. If our Station 3 is unavailable because there's another call and we get a call in that area, that same service area, Cary will respond with us. But that's also reciprocal. If they're out on a call in that area and they get another call, we'll respond with them if we're available. So it's a very good relationship. And I would say that we benefited in the sense that that's a two-company station for Cary. We're the third company there. It's equivalent to adding two companies to our department because they're able to respond to us when we get home.
Thank you.
Todd, can I just do a follow-up on that? I mean, we've always known that the ETJ area was shrinking, and over time would be none left for us to cover one day in the future. But RTP, that is our coverage. You don't think that will ever change, that agreement we have with Wake County? Do you see any changes there?
I don't anticipate any changes. In fact, with the county's new administration, including the fire part of it, they are much more receptive now to help fund that station, where in the past, in the early 90s, the county did a fire protection study, and unfortunately, they evaluated RTP as a rural area. And they missed that mark. So when we go to them to explain to them what the needs are out there, and they would just look at us and say, not our problem. But it's not that way now. They recognize how that environment's changed and how there needs to be adequate fire protection there. And we could decide to not continue providing that fire protection if we wanted to. I don't think that's a good idea. But I think as long as we want it, the county would like for us to provide fire protection there. So,
Just on her, Liz's note, I mean, they're building so much
Exactly.
apartments and stuff
Yes.
out on RTP, and I guess RTP, you have to think of it more as a, like a.
Their own.
it's its own entity.
It's a planning organization over a tract of land that doesn't have a government outside the county, and that's Durham and Wake, I guess, share it.
Right.
But at some point, you think the people that are building out there, all those, there are hundreds and hundreds of apartments.
That's exactly.
Who's going to service them?
Well,
and why is that on our shoulders necessarily?
In Wake County.
Well, no, some of that is not in RTP. That all that development that's by Hobson, that is not technically RTP. It is technically, or it is Durham. So, but Mark, you're absolutely right. I mean, RTP's next 50-year plan shows a great deal of development that will include retail and residential. And now most of that's going to start on the Durham part of RTP, not on the Wake County portion. But it will come in time on the Wake County side of RTP, which, hopefully we have to revisit our agreement because then it becomes a bigger coverage. Yeah, it's not just these RTP office parks.
I would think if you actually had a station out where that land is, they'd expect you to service.
So what is the agreement?
And they likely will. Yeah. You're probably correct. But again, that would come at a cost for them, of course, to do that.
But what is the current agreement? Just the Wake County side or the Durham side too? What we have?
That is correct. We only provide fire protection for the Wake County portion of RTP. Now, certainly if they have an event there, we're automatic response. But the Durham County side has Durham County departments that respond to that.
Yeah, because all
and you keep in mind, we're always going to have a lot of unincorporated area because there's RTP, there's all the interstates, places like that that will never really be annexed, and they'll want to. We spend a lot of time on I-40 going to crashes, by the way.
Yeah, I have a few questions I wrote down. Like one thing is, you suggested that many of our equipments are out of service. And that is a concern, right? And then the mileage on the vehicles are increasing. So what kind of do we have a track of what kind of warranties we have? And because these are high budget vehicles,
Yeah.
we spend a lot of money, and within 5 years and 70,000 miles that we had to rebuild the machine and everything. What kind of warranties that we get when we buy the trucks? So that's kind of a concern that we are not able to, we buy and we're not able to use our equipment.
Yeah, so, there are standard warranties that come with fire apparatus. The aerial device itself has like a 10-year warranty. Engines have typical warranties with those, transmissions, water tanks, they all have standard warranties. If we're operating at full staffing, we can maximize the useful life of our trucks. What we've learned in the last, say, 5 years, when we're not operating at adequate staffing, we do overwork the trucks, and we have more breakdowns, and we have to spend more money. And the money is an issue, but it's more of a problem of the truck not being in service. I mean, you take an engine rebuild, that could be a 3-month time that truck's out of service. And we don't have enough trucks that we can have 2 of them out of service without compromising our service delivery. And just to kind of put that in perspective, we have had to borrow a fire truck from a neighboring department for an extended period of time because we had so many trucks out of service. So it is important that we maintain a decent replacement plan, which we do, but adequate staffing would also extend that life and the apparatus availability. The trucks that I mentioned tonight are not in service because we don't have the staffing to operate them. It's not because they're broke down. It's just we don't have people to operate them. And in some cases, it's not the number of people, it's the trained people we need to operate them.
Sure.
Skilled positions needed.
And one thing is, unlike Raleigh, Morrisville is 10 square miles, so how many miles are we putting? Because from point A to point B is not like a whole lot, right? So it's like we're not really overrunning our machines because we have 3 stations and we are kind of having our own domains that it's servicing areas. You know?
The 10 square miles is a little misleading. One, because we're a rectangle shape. It's not like we're round, but also you do have to consider we have more unincorporated area we protect than we do city limits. It's about 12 square miles outside the city that we protect, and we go in those areas every day, for calls. We do run mutual aid with our neighbors that need it. Durham, Cary, Chatham County, Apex. We've been to Holly Springs a few times, so. Some of our vehicles that are more active are putting 8,000 to 10,000 miles a year on a fire truck, and that might not sound a lot for your personal vehicle, but that's a lot of miles for a fire truck. But again, that's why we have the replacement plan we do, so that we replace them at a time where we don't experience all those failures and breakdowns and additional cost. Fire trucks are not pampered. We don't crank the truck up, let it warm up for 3 to 5 minutes, and ease out the fire station. That's not how it works. You crank the truck and you go on down the road, and that does affect the life of the engine and the other parts. But we have a good replacement plan that's solid, and getting the additional staffing and putting promoted people in those positions will help increase the longevity.
I'm not worried about the replacement plan. I'm more worried about the warranty plans, so that we don't.
One of the options we can look at, and we've done this with one of our aerials, you can purchase extended warranties, but, part of it is we really don't want to keep fire trucks to the point where you have to, even having a warranty to replace an engine, that doesn't take away the time the truck's out of service. It might impact how much money we pay, but we're still being affected when it's not available to run calls. So warranties, we can look at extended warranties, but we're still getting hurt with the amount of time it's been out of service. Realistically, put it in perspective like this, all of our trucks need to be available to run calls 97% of the time. So think about that. 3% of the time in a course of a year, we can afford for it to be out of service and not be available to run calls. In the course of a year, how many days is that? Let's just round it off to 10. Our normal preventive maintenance program, we service that truck twice a year. We change the fluids and filters. The average out of service time per service is 2 days. Not that it takes 2 days to change the oil and the filters, but what happens is during the course of a period of time, we build a list of discrepancies. When that truck goes in for regular service, we provide the list to the mechanic, and most of the delay or the 2 days are waiting for the parts to get there. They change the vehicle fluids and filters, and then they fix that discrepancy list. So in a year, that truck's been out of service 4 days for regular service. What happens when a life safety discrepancy occurs unanticipated? We take the truck out of service immediately. Sometimes it has to be towed. You got to order parts. It only gives you 6 days. It's almost impossible to maintain that in service time when you have a lot of breakdowns. So it is important we don't keep trucks too long, because we would never have them in service enough to provide the fire protection.
I'm totally with you, because you keep your trucks mint condition. We have seen that. We have.
Well, firefighters take pride in their equipment.
So, but for me is like, why, pay like extra for if we don't have a good warranty? That's what's the whole thing. Yeah. If you had to take it out of service, that's always. Yeah. Maintenance is always part of it.
We can look into that, the warranty thing, because there are options when we purchase. We can get extended warranties.
That's it.
Okay, so of all these charts that you just showed us, where you have minimum current staffing, typical day, with these 3 firefighter requests, where does that leave? Which chart are we? What's that?
What would happen is...
let's talk where we're going here.
These particular 3...
Add a fire helmet to the current staff.
Current staffing. Okay,
Pictures, yes.
That's true.
all right, current staffing.
Like the numbers.
Yep, and it would increase one of those firefighters to a skilled driver position as well.
Need both.
And that one will give, because you'll move somebody else to the brush 3, and we'll all be rocking and rolling here.
We'd certainly be operating much more efficiently. You're exactly right. There still be days with normal. Keep in mind, it's really important. 80% of the time, we look like the typical staffing, because we do allow 2 people off, and a third one can call out before we actually before we have to call people back in. But the typical staffing is what we normally look like every day, 80% of the time. So even when we hire this third firefighter, it doesn't solve all the problems, but it puts us in a better position, certainly. It's progress. It's significant progress. What I would say to you, something to think about, if you ever decide that you don't want to approve the staffing, the 12 additional, it is my opinion we should make plans to move away from the quint concept. Again, because the additional costs that would be associated with keeping those quints in service, I don't think would be worth it. So again, I know it's a decision you have to make, but that's how significant the staffing is. If we couldn't get to that point, we probably should think about going back to traditional fire protection.
Okay, so I thought we had made that commitment to the quint concept. So that's number 1. Number 2, are we too far gone to go back?
You're not too far gone, but I do believe you've made the commitment. But I also realize you have to make decisions every budget year to approve the next step.
we knew that when we committed to this concept. I mean, you were clear that this was a multi-year process that would involve personnel and vehicles alternating, moving forward for several years. So
Okay.
I thought we had made that commitment. I appreciate the review and the follow-up and the re-education, but I'm under the impression we've made that commitment, and I've not wavered from that commitment personally. So,
Yeah, a big part of this for me is the getting to the point where we can start running the rescues for the EMT calls, because that's where a lot, as you said.
Yeah, we're at 50% now. 5 years ago, we were only at 25%. That's how much percentage that's increased.
Right.
As we get more people, that's going to keep going up. We might not ever be like our neighbors at 70 and 80%.
Right.
Because a lot of our people leave during the day. And that might keep us from getting to that 78%. But we're seeing that go up. The percentage is going up. This puts us in a position to provide that service more efficiently. Right. Squad goes on a medical call, we still have the Quinn in service for fire. That's an ideal situation.
So I too am committed to the Quint concept. My biggest concern is the skills. Staffing levels are significant, but if you don't have a driver, it doesn't matter how many staff you have. And you got to roll when you got to roll. So, that I'd like to see, the right people, getting up to speed over time, and that training and development program kind of enhanced a little.
And I think you just sort of emphasized why the recommendation is different that truck and firefighters and the firefighter, we've learned that the time frame to get the training up warrants bringing them on. We're going to order a truck and it's 12 to 18 months before we get it. So this has them more prepared when the truck arrives.
and just one more thing that I think is really important to note. When we started out tonight, Martha, you gave us kind of an overview of, or a snapshot of where Morrisville was 10 years ago and where we are today. And one of the things we talked about was population. And 10 years ago, we were, 13,500 people. Today, 2016 number you have in here is almost 24,000, and we're more than that today. 10 years ago, we thought we would tap out at 30,000. We are not going to tap out at 30,000. I think, based on all that we have already, this council has already approved, we're probably going to hit 30,000 or more, and I think there's more to come beyond that. So this concept is incredibly important for the future of this town, because I don't think our growth is going to stop anytime soon. I think it will change over time, whatever that growth is, but it certainly is not going to stop. So I think it's really important to remember that we committed to this concept for the long haul and for the future. And I think it's important that we continue down this road. So.
Want to take a break?
I believe this is a good place to take a break.
All right, let's take a 10-minute break. See you back at 8:35.
Thank you.
The thing will be done.
The time is now 8:32. We'll go back in session here. Turn it back to Martha.
Thank you, Mayor. Some of this will go quickly. I appreciate the time on the Quints, and we'll need to spend a little bit of time on health care. Just touching base on merit pay, not making recommended changes here. The average merit pay that we've told you in the past several years is around 3.5%. That's based on sort of a standard bell curve distribution of the merit ratings our employees get, 2 for meets expectations, 3 for above, and 4% for beyond the call of duty. Very few of those, and they go through a pretty rigorous review to make sure that that's documented. Again, very performance-based. A lot of the projects and initiatives or performance goals and a lot of performance evaluations this year, it's very comparable to what we've requested in prior years. Something that it's not different, but I don't know that we've ever called out. When we talk about $450,000, that's not all salary. You know, there's cost to the taxes and the benefits. So it's the all-in number that just really wanted to clarify that we're making a recommendation this year. Also, I'm sorry?
You said this was not a recommendation. When you started this, you said this is the average. Are you saying this is the recommendation?
We would proceed this way. Council has to approve the funds. We're not recommending changes to how we manage the performance evaluation process.
We had in prior years considered different methods for the performance, but this year it's the same method.
It is.
For evaluation.
I guess at some point I want to have a discussion then about just assuming it's going to be 3.5% each year.
Happy to talk about that. 3.5% is sort of it's just what it works out to across the distribution of employees based on how our performance merit rating system works.
So just to be clear, I think, so the ratings have been completed, is just...
They aren't at this moment.
Okay.
But they will be by the time a fiscal year would be started.
And the spread is anticipated to be approximately 3.5 based on that rating spread.
Based on the number of employees and the sort of the ratings distribution.
Okay.
And it's been correlated with the 2%, 3%, 4%. That was something we introduced 2 years ago.
I guess that's what my hesitation is, that just because we did something last year, the year before that, I do the budgets for a fairly large company. 3.5% is year over year over year is very generous, to put it mildly.
I disagree in the public sector. We can continue to fall behind what other peer municipalities tend to offer.
And I think that's kind of where the rubber meets the road. Yeah, I think I guess, what are you suggesting, or what do you...
I think we have to look at not just doing what we did last year, because we did it last year, but what, how many applications do you get when we do have an opening? I mean, I think it's more than just a couple, which tells me that there's a lot of people that want to work for Morrisville.
We get hundreds of unqualified applications. That's correct.
You do.
Yes.
But you also get some pretty good qualified applications too, I would imagine.
And part of it is because of what we offer the employees year over year after year.
So it's a combination of turnover because of future opportunities, a better economy, as well. One thing that I've wondered about is the lap salary being so high. Is that because we don't have the number of qualified candidates? I did speak to a police officer over the weekend, and, I said, we noticed there was a new officer that was introduced to the council in the previous meeting, and it's really great that, you have new officers added from the last budget cycle. And he said that there's been openings that have been reoccurring due to staff turnover and, various things. And it just says to me there's a need for qualified applicants, and it's not always just about having the openings, but it's the qualifications. And police officers are just one example, but other opportunities in the town might have the same issue. So
We have experienced an increased number of applicants turning jobs down because we couldn't meet their salary requests.
do we track that? Is that, unless you're thoughtfully tracking it, you probably don't have that information, but it might be helpful for us to understand why there is a need to look at the salaries as well as the benefits, perhaps?
And I would like to go ahead and put some more detailed information from you. Might be helpful because this conversation is going to get much broader pretty quickly based on some other recommendations I want to make besides just merit pay. As we've done the last couple years, we're also recommending that 2% adjustment to our pay ranges. That is something that affects those numbers of applicants. It represents an entry-level employee. We're often looking for more than an entry-level employee to come in. It is something that potential recruits look at across, especially the Wake County. If we don't do that, our market salary average does fall behind, and it will affect us in keeping and getting employees. When the pay plan was established, the recommendation is you have to just periodically update your pay plan. It doesn't stay stagnant as inflation changes and those other types of adjustments happen out in the world. This change does not change any current employee's salary. There's not an audit 2% adjustment for every employee. Only employees that end up falling below, if we adjust the rate, and that's really a very small handful when that occurs, actually get a salary adjustment because we don't pay below the minimum for the pay range. We had not done that for several years, and some of our markets fell behind compared to other jobs.
Are you saying the 2% and the 3.5, like 5.5?
No, the 2% is just a range of salary that you pay for a job. The 3.5% average is related to what an actual salary is, that it gets adjusted based on your performance.
So that's the average. Then that could be...
Yeah, the 3% is just, again, based on a distribution of ratings that we typically see in our organization.
So what's the min, what's the max on that?
Well, the minimum is 0.
And the max?
4%.
How many people does it affect?
How many people does what affect?
A merit raise. So how many people last year or over the last 5 years got, we have 170 people. Mm-hmm. 10 of them get merit pay raises, 15,
No.
20?
Almost everybody gets a merit pay raise. It's how much. If you have an employee that's getting a 0, you're probably working them out the door.
So we had approximately 130 that would, because you have some that maybe are in an intro period situation. You have the transition of people leaving and coming on board. So out of 162 last year, we had about 130, 140 that were eligible for a merit.
Now, every year when this comes up, I always say, is this sustainable for us? So every year that's like a penny in property tax.
We need the people to do the jobs, yes.
Because I know other towns don't do this. I know state government doesn't always do it.
They get cost of living, which we do not offer, and I'm not aware of any local municipality that isn't offering comparable or more than this.
Every year.
Every year we bring you those comparisons, and they have been similar.
Sometimes I see bonuses.
We do not do bonuses.
No, I know. So I found it, but I don't. I know that some towns haven't done it.
And there's been years in Morrisville's past that they were not done when there was an economy downturn.
Right. Well, right, but I just wish we'd check on it, but again, sustainable. Is it sustainable that every year, so you're anticipating a penny on the property tax?
I believe you reward your employees for their performance, yes.
Okay, but not all governments do that. That's all I'm trying to say. Municipalities or state governments, certainly not with school teachers.
We're not a school district.
But
all our peer municipalities offer comparable or higher pay adjustments every year for the last several years.
Just show us the data again. I'd like to see it.
In the past, you have gathered that information. We have seen that, and I will tell you, Michael, you're right. Various departments or various towns have done it differently over the years, but No, I don't. I think they all do it. They all give some kind of compensation to their employees. So to not compensate our employees for a good job, I have a huge problem with that. And we can have this discussion and we can look at comparable data, but to eliminate it, I have a huge problem with that.
I didn't say that. I just want to look at the data, and we've in the past we've talked about the pool. We could adjust the pool.
What do you mean adjust the pool?
The amount of money put in it was referred to as a pool, the $450,000 or whatever it was. Somebody said use only $300,000, $200,000.
Oh, gotcha.
That's correct.
Gotcha.
That concept has been used as, the amount of adjustment.
Do that too.
Okay. If we could see comparable data from surrounding communities.
Years past, to go back a few years.
Well, no, I'm not sure. Why would you want to go back? I want to know what's happening today. Who's our competition today?
Show that there are towns that don't do this every year. I'm just sustainable. Can you do that every year?
And I don't think that we're making the assumption that we're going to do 3.5% every year. Every year we evaluate based on market conditions and based on projected, competition, our peers. We need to retain talent and reward for performance. So maybe next year something happens to the economy, we wouldn't necessarily say 3.5%. We would have to reconsider all those situational things.
And we have done that in the past. We sure have.
And I think from a corporate point of view, pool is very common because it's always, like when we do it, it always says, yes, an average of 3.5, which is fair, but always comes down from a bucket of pool. It's then the rankings go up, whoever is a top rank, but it all has to fight to the pool of money. Because every time, even though I'm top performer, as a division head or anything, every division is given only a certain amount of pool money, and then they fight among themselves. That's how it's a fight competition, and that's how it goes.
So that is a corporate model that I also am a member of, which is not very fun.
But it's not very fun, and that is true.
Right, but the model that we have is similar here, but not exactly.
But how is the money generated, right? Like, it's not free money. It's
right. I think what is presented, though, is like the delta.
It's a reverse delta here taking. Like, it's taken, I think, Martha, if I'm not mistakenly wrong, you took an average of 3.5 times 169 and then calculated to coming with benefits to 450, right? That's how you calculated the 450.
Yeah, I mean, the 3.5% is just an average percent, and this is, we haven't calculated this out because we don't have performance rating. It's a ballpark estimate.
Exactly, and then times 169, and then back reversed it with benefits, and then came up with that. So you do the other reverse engineering, like we get it in our corporate, saying, okay, you have 300,000, and then use the min and max 0 to 4, and then distribute it. And I'm saying whatever we want to decide is our discretion, and then.
I mean, ultimately, it's how do we feel we need to reward the employees,
And that is fine. I mean to say that's a discussion that we don't have to bog down right now. It's just an estimate. We can go down towards the budget and then revisit it. That's just let's not bog down into this number right now. It's an estimate. If we have many things to go.
Yes. So let's turn to the next page because Jeannie has provided just what our I guess I'll say our real experience has been over the past years. So some of these increases are related to the fact that there's more employees, and we haven't. But this is what the average has been over the last several years.
Before we do that, I just want to make clear that when these merit pay is based on specific performance targets that we give departments and individual employees. So I think we always have to look at what we can afford based on this economic situation. But I think paying someone based on doing a good job, based on merit, is very different than just giving a blanket salary adjustment. So even though there's a cost attached to it, I think we have to look at what does that mean for Morrisville. If we reward someone that's doing a good job, they're going to have more of a reason to want to stay and produce, which is better in the long term for the town.
Right, Steve, but traditionally, my point is the way you pick it up is at the back end in government with pensions and health care. Whereas out on the other world, that's where they cut it.
Yeah. Only part of our staff has pensions.
No, all of our, it's retirement. I don't know that I'd call it a pension.
Retirement planning.
Retirement. It's fair, and here's some of the data I was asking about. It's on the next page. Great. Okay.
Could you explain the pie chart?
We're just trying to illustrate that of that 450, some of it is related to the fact if you're salary higher, there's a little bit more taxes to pay, a little bit more FICA, a little bit more Social Security, a little bit more percentage that goes into the retirement. It's just that component that isn't an actual salary adjustment, but there's a cost to the town for those things.
And there's talk about sustainability. All of this, if it ends up being 3.5%, that is recurring.
It is.
Okay. And the way, when you started talking about the 2% earlier, I sort of thought of that as like the other fees that we're talking about, just kind of right sizing. It's kind of how I sort of thought about that.
It is, that is just a range of salary based on a job classification that's evaluated, a starting and an ending range that are appropriate for that level of skill, knowledge, et cetera.
So we're just trying to make sure that we're meeting the market in Wake County for employees.
Yeah.
So the 2% would just shift that range 2% from the bottom, 2% up.
Okay.
I'm sorry,
Each
Mark.
of those grades.
It doesn't result in a pay increase unless that employee was just hired as at the minimum range.
Right.
And now they fall below that.
Yep. It's just for going forward. It's essentially for new hires entering the band.
So it really adjusts.
It is. No, he's right.
But if you're at the top of your band, you just add another 2%.
Move it.
It does move the end as well.
Move the end. But
It moves
Makes you
both.
eligible for
That's what I mean.
It
It helps.
doesn't
It helps.
automatically give it to you.
I know, but
Yeah.
it widens the band. And instead of stopping at an amount, you continue.
So it impacts this chart in the budget, which is your pay range table.
So as just on this chart, I don't know where the average 3.5 comes from, because just eyeball the math there, it looks a lot, it looks like hasn't been 3.5 ever.
So again, we're basing it on performance evaluations that have not occurred yet, nor can we calculate a salary. We have 100 employees. If 30 of them get 2s, they're going to get a certain percentage, and if 30 of them get 3s, and so we've just sort of averaged that out across the complement of salaries to tell you, and I think we even said it was 3.5 last year. It's just an estimate.
Yeah, it sounds like they're sort of budgeting conservatively like they are across the board. I mean, 3.5 would be probably the high end. Maybe.
But
We'll see.
you still have to come up with a number. We can't do a budget just on, there's going to be a number in the budget that represents.
Number is 450.
Like
Estimated
there
right
was
now.
last year and the year before
Yeah.
that.
Right.
And we ended up putting it back in fund balance if it wasn't used, so.
Just be mindful that what's shown here are what it actually resulted to. So during the budget process, it could have been something that was recommended different, but you control what you want to set it at year to year, and you potentially have made changes to that request as time has passed.
So basically, we increased $2 million over the last 4 years in merit increase. Approximately.
You could look at it that way. It doesn't quite work out that way.
I don't know, just adding the chart.
But keep in mind, like Michael pointed out, we haven't changed the property tax rate to adjust for that. So that's $2 million that we're not providing other services that we would be if we were actually allocating as we increase this expense. We haven't been increasing our revenue. So that's just something to keep in the back of your mind.
I think it's really not comparable to private sector because we have these ranges, so salaries are constrained in the public sector. Whereas in the private sector, there's a true negotiation between an employee, so your salary could be anything, and those other factors that do not play into a public sector employee salary.
No, I'm not. I'm absolutely not in that way. So basically, it's like it's putting us another way a cent on the increase in the tax.
There's no question there is investment in your human capital in a yes. Yes.
At the federal level, state level, I don't think they do this.
We are not at the federal or state level.
Right, we're unique. As you indicated, you're not part of anything, so that's why I've asked for the data. I'm not going to argue anymore, but school teachers don't get it either.
But that's not our competition, if you will. I'm not worried about how we fare with our employees and our salaries to school teachers. That's not comparable. You're not comparing apples to apples. So
that's fine.
If you want to look at other surrounding municipalities and do a comparison, I think that's a little more valuable. But to compare us to a state employee or a federal employee or a teacher, I mean, and I'm not diminishing those positions. Those are all valuable positions. But I would not do a comparison. That's not an apples to apples comparison, in my opinion. I don't want to see that data.
I understand. Okay, and I've asked to see the data, that's all, because, again, my point is I don't think towns do it every year, and I think that's all I'm trying to say. It's not sustainable. It's certainly not sustainable in other states. If you go up north, New York City
don't start comparing North Carolina to other states, because I think we're
workers. That's all I'm trying to say.
Much more fiscally responsible here in this state than other states. So let's not do that. That's not a good comparison either. Because don't compare us to California. I think California has done some wacky, crazy stuff, and they have there's unions involved. Same thing with New York. There's unions involved with how their salaries are. We don't have that here. So that's not an apples to apples comparison either, quite frankly.
Well, there isn't anything. That's your point, I think.
I said I think to compare us to surrounding municipalities is a fair comparison.
I asked for that, and I know that every year they don't do it.
Oh, I have certainly seen that information in the past. We have certainly seen that information.
But we began this evening with saying that we're always going to be challenged with expenses and growth. But I remember Jeannie saying that we're looking at, higher than expected revenue. I think it was like 4% and permits are up. So we're in a better financial position now. I mean, I think if we were in that position, it's nothing wrong with reinvesting that capital. I think if things were really bad, but right now, things are good.
I'm not saying that. Okay, let's move on. Healthcare is another.
I think we're going to have this discussion again because Martha's going to bring us that information. I think that's good.
And Martha, on the estimated cost for that 450, do you have that 2%? How much they estimate?
Again, there is no cost to the 2% adjustment to the salary ranges unless an employee's actual salary falls below what that level is.
And you don't have that data right now?
We process that every time. How many of these did you adjust last year? One?
Yeah, not many. It's a handful. There's a handful. You're right. It's the people at the beginning of the range that are affected. Because then they fall off.
And it's nominal.
So this, without it's not like big numbers like these. So that's the reason when you put a 2% number.
Yeah, and that's really why there's not a number there, because there's little to no budget impact of that adjustment. It just recognizes the market changes, inflation, cost of living, comparable peer salaries. And let me continue, because that's really related to the next thing. So salary market adjustments, and we've talked about this for a couple years now, and we have benchmarked and compared our positions. I'd say probably 90% of them. We have some positions that don't benchmark directly to comparable municipalities because of unique aspects of an organization. So they get fit into the pay plan. for our unique situations. But we've done some review and compared most of our salary ranges and our actual average salary ranges across peer cities in North Carolina. So not just even in Wake County, but a subset of Wake County and then across North Carolina. I think the challenge that we are seeing is as we become bigger, the place where we compete from and attract people into positions has changed into those higher municipalities. And typically, the larger municipalities pay higher salaries. I mean, there's just a correlation. So in the past, we have been benchmarked and compared to cities under 25,000, 10,000 to 25,000. We're above that now. And so we've just done some checking of all of those positions, and we've got some things that we've observed. We're falling behind as compared to cities over 25. Now, is that significant? No, but it is in some specific cases affecting us. Example, and Todd mentioned this a little bit earlier, we're having trouble getting qualified applicants for some of our inspections and our fire marshal people. We are observing that as we speak, and that is some of the data we can provide. Not only does it lengthen the time that a position is vacant, it does result in the extended recruiting periods and then typically higher starting salaries for bringing those people into the organization. As you stay within an organization, and this sort of goes back to the merit, if other municipalities are offering raises and we aren't, our market salaries will fall behind, people leave to go somewhere else, and then we're going to end up paying more people after an extended vacancy anyways. Now, I'm generalizing on what the effects of not recognizing that the market does change, and so do salaries. That's why we've had some challenges in recruiting and getting some of our police officers in. Our starting salaries are not competitive over time with some of the other municipalities. So that is one of our challenges. As Todd mentioned, the firefighters leaving at that 3 to 5 is because other municipalities have increased salaries at a higher or faster rate than we have, so they can go somewhere else and get paid more, and that other municipality is getting a trained employee is what happens. So we're not bringing a large wholesale recommendation to do anything drastic, because I don't think we have a drastic situation here, but I think it's important information as you would consider changing our merit pay for employees who I think we do recognize by and large do a really good job for the town of Morrisville. And it's going to relate to some of the healthcare stuff that we're going to talk about as well. There are a few situations, and in general, I believe I have flexibility and authority, just like, we negotiate starting salaries. As we challenge employees in our organization and give them higher levels of responsibility, challenge them with more, they fall behind with just, and it's important, but with just a merit pay. So there are a few people in our organization that I feel warrant a market adjustment. So that is outside of performance. It probably is more a reward bonus to right-size them within our own organization for what they offer, what add value, candidly what we would have to pay to replace that employee. So it is in some ways a retention mechanism. And I just want to suggest that I have some authority to do that in those individual cases. I prefer not to talk about who those people are in a public setting because I'm not trying to pit employees against each other. So perhaps that's something we need to talk about, if you would support that, how we would handle that so that you're aware of what my recommendations are in those cases. Is there anything I can add about that?
Can I just ask I hope I can ask a question. Why wouldn't the merit pay increase help this situation?
It will help, but I'm talking about 10%.
One time.
Yes.
Right. So the market.
Or 5%.
Saying a bonus or an adjustment?
It's an adjustment.
Yeah, I always shy away from bonus as a word.
Forever, not one time.
Right.
Well, and you're correct. You're correct. You're correct.
Salary adjustment. I'm comfortable it's your staff to be compensated as you see fit, given the budget.
So Martha, I have this question. I think, again, coming from a corporate background, there were situations where, like my previous companies, I have seen that they give a lot of training. They come as a breeding ground for the best training the companies can offer. They take all the training and they basically hop out to a new company where they can get best salary. Are we creating that kind of atmosphere where they come in, they get best trained, and then in 0 to 3, 4 years that they're well qualified and they are leaving because they're well trained now, their salaries are not this one, and they are leaving? Do we have that kind of a situation?
I think any organization has some of that. We do a heck of a job with our employees. We provide lots of opportunity for our employees to do a lot of different things, learn a huge breadth of skill sets that they are very marketable for higher salaries after. So lots of our people leave for promotional opportunities that because of our size, they're not going to get here. We don't have that kind of movement. So we do have some of that. I don't know that I think we've got a pervasive problem with just being used, but just by the nature of how we operate and how we empower our employees, and again, that just reemphasizes to me how important even just a smaller merit is. If they don't feel rewarded and appreciated, and some of that's tangible and some of that's not, then more of those things happen. Then I think we've got some gaps. Now, inspections is just by its very nature a problem across. It's not just Morrisville. That sector is just not producing qualified, so everybody is at a premium.
So the reason I'm asking this, just take an example for in the firefighters. Okay, like drivers we talked about. It takes a qualified person to do a driving, and like we train him for a year or two to do that, and it takes a lot of hours and everything. You do that, and then after he's fully qualified, he can go anywhere. So which mechanism is better? Because I've seen both sides of the companies where they get, with a higher pay, a fully qualified driver to come right in and start driving. than going through the entire training process. In that way, we don't have to go through this salary adjustments and all the other factors and all the training hours and the training, dollar amounts we spend. Because there are two kinds of models that goes in the corporate I've seen, because some people have their philosophy, train everything, and with an assurance that they will stick forever. And if some people are using that as a breeding ground, okay, moment we come, they'll leave. Because I'm not worried about this 3.5, but if they are coming with this, okay, I'm done, I take this training and I'm going out, then 3.5 will not really cut them out.
And again, and Todd may want to add to this. I don't know that that's a huge issue, but let's use a practical example. And I'll use his example because I think he'll be able to complement and it'll make sense. You hire a firefighter. They're here 3 to 5 years and they're getting 2 to 3 to 4% for those years. So they finally get to where they're being trained as an engineer. So they're going to get this little small bump for promotion. But if Todd has to go out and hire a fully trained driver, we're going to have to pay a higher salary than the one we have inside. And then you have to worry about the pay equity of all the other people you have. So you have some people in, and if you bring a new person fully qualified in at a substantially higher, you've just shot employee morale. Again, another reason why you want to consider that merit pay for performance, merit pay, because there is an effect to all of those things.
But that happens everywhere in the industry because you are qualified at the point that you came in. There are people who came in with nothing and got trained from 0 to 10, and you are getting trained at already coming at the band something, right? So it's a level where you're getting.
But you're trained internally and you're artificially low.
So that's very fair in HR, like any jobs, right?
In your scenario with firefighters, in our situation, our firefighters are leaving, but they're going to other organizations as rookie firefighters, not as drivers, and they're making more money starting out at the bottom again than you're 5 years. So I think that's.
I'm just giving an example. Yeah.
Our compensation package is not as competitive as it once was, and there's opportunity to make some adjustments to be more competitive.
We're just trying to understand the training concept, how it is.
Organizations in an entry-level position making more money there than they were here.
Okay.
And so we do. So we have pockets of situations like that. But the reality is, too, just to piggyback off a little bit of what Martha was saying, is, yes, it takes a certain type of employee to work in an organization like this where you may be called a safety and risk manager, but you have to do a number of other tasks because there aren't 3 and 4 employees deep. So when we interview, for example, we have those conversations. This isn't a place for everyone. We are looking for, in my opinion, oftentimes the unique person that wants to do soup to nuts, the high-level policy and also the administrative piece, because there's no one else to do that. So that is, in many cases, a rare person. You bring them in and you try them out, and a year, 2, 3 years in, they are knocking everybody's socks off. They have taken this job and run with it, and now the pay equity is coming into play. Now you know this employee. You know their work ethic. You know their far exceeding in many cases. The pay has not kept up with that. And so in some of these unique situations, there may be, 1, 2, 3 certain positions. There may be a group of employees that we see in another pocket that we're losing them at that 3 to 5. So it's not something we can just say across the board. It is going to be in certain situations where we're having these issues where the recommendations are going to come from to make this salary adjustment, again, to be competitive also, because the reality is we are all sharing these employees. You can live in one place here, and you can be at 5, 6, 7, 8 different municipalities without moving. And that's the reality of where we are. That's the good thing, but that's also something that means we have to remain competitive with those surrounding us as well.
Thank you.
And just, we've talked about this a little bit, and this is just more food for thought. We're very lean. A department head does it all, and as we continue to challenge our department heads with strategic vision and major projects, the day-to-day still has to happen. So there's also some places in the organization that we may start foraying into the need for some assistant managers or assistant directors. And I'm not talking about adding staff, but recognizing that there is a higher level of performance, and so those individual employees doing those jobs would get the higher rate of pay. We haven't fully evaluated that. I'm not making any recommendations about that now, but I'm seeing it, I'm feeling it. It's something that's working its way through public safety, but I see it applying in other places as well. And so just so you know, we are constantly evaluating. We are not just here saying, give us more money at the end of the year. That's not, we are looking at the things that we ask of our employees and where they go and why they're going and making these recommendations. A different, and Lori and I will tag team this one, a different topic, and this was one we talked about some last budget about we renewed our healthcare plan without having the full discussion with council. So we've I think remedied that. We've done a lot of work with our healthcare this year. So some of this information is just historical. I wasn't here, but I think we hit our a major stumbling block with the amount of the healthcare increase that occurred for the fiscal year 11 budget. That's the last time council made, I think, what was a significant healthcare plan design change by putting into effect a health reimbursement account, and I'll call it an artificially high deductible that allowed us to lower our premiums, and we back funded for employees for costs over that deductible. It's a little bit complicated, but the short story is it worked. It's kept our health care rate increases, I'll call it reasonable. And again, that's in compared to some of the horror stories we hear from some of the other municipalities about what their health care cost increases are annually. We've done a pretty effective job at managing them and negotiating rates. Just a reminder that our rates are based on our actual health care costs, and so it's just a mathematical calculation as to what our costs are based on our premium or our history of medical from the prior year. So we've given you those, and we've also given you some of the plan design things we've done in minor tweaks periodically to, again, try to recognize some savings and keep those renewal amounts in line. Last year, we got an initial quote of 7.8%. Again, it was at the low end of what we were hearing from some others, but we did feel like maybe we needed to check some things after a certain number of years, so we did solicit quotes from other people. It's a strategy for us. It brought Blue Cross to, they sharpened their pencil a little bit, and we used that to leverage our rate down, and again also made some minor plan deductions to help modify employee health behavior. So, quick example, you don't go to an emergency room if you don't need an emergency room, just because it's quick and easy, because that costs us more. One of the things that really affects us are high-cost claimants, and we've got a stop loss at 90,000. But if we have anybody with a healthcare condition that's significant, it's not too hard to get to 90,000 really quickly. And then everything over 90,000 sort of counts against us. So we're always also looking at our high cost claimants. When we went into negotiations this year, we got a similar renewal quote of 7.8%. They, at that point, had pulled our claims history through a certain period of time to calculate out what their forecasting and trending. We went back to talk to them about negotiating that. They pulled our history again. We had a high-cost claimant come into play, and they will not move off of 7.9%. So we started talking about what our strategy should be. We tested the market a little bit last year, and we've talked about doing that this year. Again, there are advantages and disadvantages to that. And we could consider additional plan design changes or look at other options. So we've spent a lot of time looking at what those other options are. Another thing we did that complemented our review of this was we did an employee benefit survey earlier this year, and I think people are overall very satisfied with our benefits, but the significant complaint is the cost of our family insurance. And so, and it's true, we are, the amount an employee has to pay for family health care insurance with us is very, very high. We're much higher than you would have expected us to be. So we looked a lot about why that was. There's, I think, a number of reasons. There's distributions of premium structure across the various tiers, and by that I mean employee with child, family. Not really reflective of where the medical costs are coming in. So because of the way our premiums have been structured, and then the formula of how much the town has agreed to cover and how much the employee cover is kind of skewed a little bit. We also have a pretty rich health care plan, and I would tell you our health care plan is much richer than any other peer municipality that I've seen. And then we don't require the employee to pay anything towards the cost of that health insurance. So we looked at all of those things, and we are recommending, I'll call it, pretty substantial changes to our health care plan. And it involves all of those things. There is a mechanism that we can, I'll call it, right size our premium structure to really reflect what the real employee cost is, and it serves as the base for all those other tiers. By that mathematical calculation, it allows the cost of the family coverage, the dependent coverage, to come down. We're recommending the implementation of a second plan, a base plan that would have a less rich amount of benefits, but would cost less. It moves the burden of health care cost in some way to the employee. There's co-insurance involved. They would not be eligible for that health reimbursement account. Their co-pays would be a little bit higher, so there's more money out of the employee's pocket so that they pay less premium. We want to continue to enhance the wellness incentive because it matters for our long-term health care cost projections, and we're proposing implementing a payroll deduction if you want to stay on the current rich plan. So if you want the higher level of coverage, the employee would have a choice. We haven't had employees have a choice So they haven't had to make conscious healthcare decisions for themselves. So if you want to keep the higher plan, you're going to have to contribute to that plan. If we did all of those things, and I think we are recommending it is not the year to go out to market with those high-cost claimants in play. And Lori will talk about what those advantages and disadvantages are, but it would allow us to achieve what we think is a 2% increase in our premium cost this year. We would reap more benefits next year as our health care costs would go down. So it's sort of an investment for maintaining a much lower increase this year and seeing how people choose plans and then driving some of that health care cost down long range. The results, the two items in red are just as it's the things we've heard from our employees that would have add value. As if you choose the higher plan, there's cost to you, cost that you've never had before at the employee level. And there is a way you could still have, there's one way that you could have still free health care coverage for an employee, which would be choose the base plan and participate in the wellness incentives. So again, employees would have a choice, but they would also have the responsibility to make the decisions themselves. I'm going to let Lori sort of talk to the market discussion.
Martha, quick question before you go to that. You said earlier that Blue Cross Blue Shield came in with a 7.9, negotiated, stayed with the 7.9. Is the 2% that you're referring to here, is that, is it now 2% and not 7.9?
That's correct.
Okay.
It would change what we estimate our cost increase to be from 7.9 to about 2%.
And what is that 7.9 or 2% equate to?
Do you know that number? What's 2% of our, hold on, I can figure it out. Talk about the advantages. I've got the numbers here.
All right. Okay, so if we were to go to market, of course, an advantage could be that a new carrier may well offer us, a lower renewal number, and Blue Cross then could decide to try to meet that lower renewal number. Again, unlikely. They have indicated to us they're very firm based on that latest claim information. They have basically already said we're firm where we are. So unlikely, but a possibility. A disadvantage of going to market is that with the new claims information, even going out to market, they may look at that as well and not offer a lower number. Again, we don't know that unless we were to go out, but they would be able to pull the same information and likely would not lower it either significantly or not at all, potentially.
On that issue, are you assuming that the event, the one-off event that drove things up, is continuing?
Yes.
So, okay. That's the assumption, is that it's continuing.
So again, we're very constrained by HIPAA, but I can guarantee you that high-cost claimant will continue, and we are at least aware of 2 others that could get there.
So all of this is not just for this year.
Correct. Correct.
That's why we're saying maybe more leverage next year, potentially.
If it was
Yes.
a one-time event in the
Yes.
past, that I was curious as to why that would really matter. It's the ongoing situation.
I've heard, yeah.
Yeah, again, when they pulled our premiums the first time, that high-cost claimant hadn't been introduced. Within 2 months, it was there, and it is going to continue.
I've heard that some organizations, like mid-market type organizations, are looking at self-insured because of this very problem. I mean, and I don't know whether that's something down the road that we could consider. I've heard governments also are looking at that. There's also options out there. I mean, I don't think we would ever do something like this, but what's interesting is that even in North Carolina, I've run across a couple companies that are offering, like for those high cost procedures like knee replacements or hip replacements, some cardio procedures where they actually can, it's called global health options or medical tourism. And there's one company in North Carolina that's been getting a lot of, he's reducing the costs of healthcare for manufacturing companies by up to 60%. And when he initially started the business, he thought it was going to be for uninsured. But I think even this company is getting approached by governments, counties and stuff like that. But I just don't know if that's something that we could.
So let me do the global. If you don't know what Councilmember Rao's talking about, it's you go to Thailand for your hip replacement because it costs less there. So you put your plane ticket and everything in. Be quite a stretch for municipalities.
It's tough. You can't, it's tough. But some
I
governments
have self-insured municipal experience. All the risk is on you, is what I can say. But I would tell you, and I don't think this is a conversation that we have now, but one of the things that we could theoretically do in the future, if this works, and I tell you, I think Lori and I have pretty high confidence that this does a lot of good things for us. But if let's say, and I'm going to make these numbers up, let's say our health care budget is $2 million, and we save by doing this $500,000, you've really got two choices. You could reduce your budget, or you could reserve that 500 to protect yourself from future year increases. Just a concept to sort of throw out there, because we'll see the real effects of this. We're estimating for you, we'll see the real effects at renewal premium next year.
So that's true. And going back to what Steve was saying is, I don't know how town insurances work, but for corporate insurances, if anything happens to me overseas or anything, I pay and I get reimbursed. Mm-hmm. So that's fully on me. So, but if town, it's all insurance to insurance, that comes under, if I get something done overseas, and give the bill, it goes back. If my insurance will accept it to get that procedure done overseas, that's completely a different conversation. But
yeah, it's a concept. I mean,
but for my insurance, it's accepted globally, like United Health, and it's part of the AT&T policy that it's accepted worldwide. Anywhere you have anything, that you just pay the bill, and that they'll reimburse it worldwide, anywhere you have your procedure.
Now, even with our current plan, and even with the proposed base, the base plan, there are in-network and out-of-network costs. So if you aren't in network, you have to pay more.
Yeah, but does that include globally?
Anyone out of network, you'd pay more.
The town doesn't have a global policy.
See, that's what it is.
So that everything outside is out.
I'm sorry, Lori. You want to finish?
Sorry, I didn't mean to get off track.
No problem. So back to disadvantages. If you stay with Blue Cross, the carrier may not quote a competitive lower rate in the future. So there aren't that many carriers, so you've got to be careful when you go to market. And if they do try to quote something competitive and we don't go with them, you could potentially be lowering that pool of quotes to even fewer carriers, from 4 to 3, 3 to 2, depending on that. Again, with the new claims information, this just may not be the best strategic move. We might have more leverage in future years and just more known information. There's a lot of unknown information, I would say, this year in particular. The disadvantage would be that we would be potentially, if we were going to market, we could not stay with our current network and providers that we've now had for a significant number of years. So that would be potentially a disadvantage.
But why do you think that with the current claims, the claims could be next year also, right?
Yes, we don't.
You can't predict that next year the claims would be less.
You can't.
So,
Yeah,
so
we really don't.
it's hypothetical.
What we know today
Yeah,
is we know based on this renewal right now. And we have some strong indicators, but there could be something new that comes up that we don't know about, certainly in any given year.
Also, if Obamacare is repealed and that happens, there's going to be a lot of administrative changes.
You'll see that.
All right, sorry.
Exactly. Yeah, so some other considerations, just that if we did go out to market and a carrier were to offer us a lower percentage, we should probably be ready to move. Using that leverage in the next year, it's going to lower our bargaining power. So we would need to be prepared to not just use it as a competitive situation, but to move. Again, we'd likely will have used our strategic leveraging then this year. Is this the year to do it? And less likely we would get those competitive quotes in future years or the future year. And likely a large increase next year if we were to go with another. We know our claims are going to be, the known this year is we know next year we're going in with some significant claims. So it may be better to use the out-of-market quote in the following year. And then, of course, the unknown of ACA. That's the Affordable Care Act that you were referring to. We don't know how that's going to impact. Maybe we will have some more knowns by next year. Maybe not, but maybe we will. That would help us.
Yeah, if you've ever experienced a change in provider uproar, that's intangible, but that is the impact. Who your doctors, your prescription. It's.
That's the point I was trying to make. There's going to be a change if this happens. It could change the plans, the coverage, and then it's.
But why would affordable health care change our plans? Because Blue Cross Blue Shield is not a part of, Affordable Care Act, and ours is all a private.
There are taxes involved that are put on the carriers with the Affordable Care Act. There are things that are coming up. There's things like a Cadillac tax that they've talked about with the affordable. So a lot of the carriers are in anticipation of that, when that was an assumption that was going forward, have done certain things. Now, with it being up in the air, I've said I honestly cannot predict from year to year what our renewal will be. I really have no idea, because every year in the last at least few, there have been so much uncertainty, and it's not just our claims, but also the environment that we're operating in, that it really is tough to know year to year what kind of renewal we're going to have.
Insurance never went, private insurance never went low or higher based on anything.
So just to finish it up, our dental premium cost increase is $1 per prescriber per month. We are on the league plan for that, so we get the benefit of that pooling. We have flexible spending savings account debit cards that currently only work in retail locations. We've been able to expand that so that you can use them in doctor's offices and things like that. That's an added value. No major changes to our voluntary benefits other than we're going to ease the administration and building by moving to one provider. We'll be able to provide online enrollment to employees. If we make these changes, there would be a massive wholesale education and direct touch of every employee as they have to make these choices to support the employees in knowing what their responsibilities are, and help with that online enrollment. And I think.
So just to recap, so there's going to be two medical plans. One will be the base plan that will be free to employees, but not their family. The family rate will be.
There is still I'll call it a nominal contribution by the town to the dependent coverage, but the employee is covering most of that dependent coverage.
Okay, so but
that's not. We haven't made a recommendation of changing that.
Okay. But you said that family rate was very high, and you were looking to lower that. Is that what's in the base? Their
It
share is
actually
lower?
affects every tier. It's just the redistribution to where it should be, which is the employee cost, lowers the total cost for that family coverage, so it drives down their premium. It doesn't cost us anymore because we're just recognizing that it really should have been in this bucket anyways. And it's a mathematical, and we're adding the employee payroll deduction so that the employees are sharing in that part of it. And so that's sort of how it balances out.
Okay, so that's the base plan. And then the current plan will stay in existence, but the employee will now need to pay into it.
Correct.
Okay, and how much is that then?
Well, we're here. We've run some models, and we've looked at models that would require, just talking about employee, because everything builds off that. I've modeled some scenarios that would require a $40 employee contribution a month, so $20 a pay period, or $50 a month, that is $25 a pay period. That's with a wellness incentive. If you don't participate in the wellness incentive, that would be $80 and $90.
And we do that wellness incentive now. So
Correct.
That's not new. And that actually, that monthly cost is pretty darn reasonable.
Yep. More 5Ks.
That's pretty darn. But anyhow, okay, so no employees know about this yet. This has not been.
Since I've been here, I've probably dropped little breadcrumbs about I could see employee contributions to health care coming into play. Some of the other things actually is in response to the concerns we've heard expressed by employees, and it works to our advantage, and they get choice, and they get involvement, and we've been able to lower some premiums. So I think it hits a lot of check boxes.
Okay, and you talked a little bit about the differences between the two plans, but are they drastically very different? I mean, because you called one the Cadillac plan and you called the other one the base plan.
So
I'm envisioning like stripped down bare, like
in simplest terms, and this is more stuff that we can bring back to you. We have a decision to make. This is one we need to sort of get a yay or nay as much as possible, because we're at a hold on annual enrollment. And it'll be more involved this year if we go this way. The base plan we would propose is much more similar to what other peer municipalities offer. And then it leaves our existing plan in place, but that's now a buy-up plan.
Thank you.
And that comes from the survey too, where Martha mentioned, a number of our employees saying, especially those on the family plan, the expense of it. And so now what this dual plan option would provide is for those employees that say, I know we have a great plan, but really all I need year in and year out is my preventive screenings. I have some medication here and there, but those that need it, so those that are using it are going to be paying for it, is maybe a way to think about that other plan. But they're willing to do that because they say year in and year out, generally, I'm really not paying that much. So if I can have a lower premium, and I know the plan isn't as rich or as good as the other one, I'm okay with that because I'm a very infrequent user of it anyway.
Okay, and then just one last question, because we're talking a lot about employee benefits tonight, and clearly, we're also talking about retention and recruitment of the best employees. So how does this, from a financial standpoint, clearly I see the benefit. How does this fit in with the whole recruitment and retention and
So most,
conversation?
but not all, peer cities require some employee contribution, so that is not unusual. There are still some out there that do not require that. Again, it's a little bit difficult to compare to self-insured, but so so the strategic $40 and $50, here's the basic math. If it was a $40 a month contribution for an employee at really our lowest salary level of let's say 30,000, it's 2% to them. That and again, there's pre-tax and all that other kind of stuff that we're not taking in. No one's going to like it, but does it help us? Should it help us in the future? And it's an investment in the future. We expect it to drive down and keep our health costs reasonable. And again, we've got ways to incentivize, take care of your health.
Yes.
And I think that is an important component of the plan. And there is choice. There is a free plan, and because of the restructuring, even for family coverage, it's a little bit less, and there's no increase, which is the real, there's not an 8% increase in there.
I can say
because
so.
we've been passing those increases along. That's a dollar for dollar increase for those that have dependent coverage.
On the recruitment end, just anecdotally, is when we have had now in a few different situations over maybe the last couple of years where we've had an offer out to a prospective employee who needs to cover a family in particular, and they look at that number and say, wow, either I can't come or we need to relook at salary, because that is a significant difference out of my pocket. And all the talking in the world about, but the plan is richer. Yes, but they have to still be able to afford that monthly premium. And they're saying they can't do it without a significant look at that salary. So we have some of that has occurred as well on the hiring end.
So the base plan actually has less cost out of pocket. So that dependent coverage is less.
Well,
Because that's the thing. Otherwise, we're just taking something away to give choice.
they would become responsible for some share of health costs every time, rather than everything being covered at the front end.
You run your own health. That's the choices you make. I'm going to say everyone, there are levels of it.
Yeah. So
Premiums would be lower,
Yeah.
but you're asking if the
5Ks and
premiums would be
marathons.
lower, and yes, if they took the low-cost plan, base plan, the premium would be lower for family coverage than it is today.
correct.
They get less, but they pay less.
Yes.
Correct.
There's
Yes.
less money out of their pocket.
Yes.
There's less money out of their pocket for a premium,
Right.
and then the rest depends on what their usage of the health care plan is.
And they wouldn't have the health reimbursement
Correct.
anymore either.
Correct. So they have to get correct.
So Martha, in all these things, how, if say I'm an employee, and you're obviously an employer, if I equate all these discussions till now we had the 3.5, we had the 2%, we had the merit increase, and then, which is all very good, and then you're putting the health cost, and then pretty much you're nullifying whatever that amount is to the health cost, because with the family, which is a very good plan, and then it all gets sucked up into those things. What is it? Do you have some kind of numbers that you can show us next time? Like what are they looking at?
Yeah, I could run you some scenarios because it changes for every employee.
Because
Yeah.
it's if it is a 30,000 employee, 3.5 is hardly anything. If it is this one, but the health premium with the family, as what Laurie is saying, that is a significant part, which basically people have a problem supporting their family with insurance. That is a big thing than these things. So what is important for you as a manager to retain? Because we have only 169 employees. Not to say that you will be expanding, but what is the most critical thing that is number one on the list is the employee, like family, benefits, which is the key factor that is driving people away.
So I will tell you how we discuss this as staff. This is a total compensation discussion.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to strip one thing out because you're right. You give a raise, you make them pay more for the health insurance. So
It's
yeah.
kind of
So we're always trying to talk about that total compensation package.
When I see my regular, salary increase, okay, you gotta, and Mark is right. We never get, 3-4 is a very high. You get a 2%, and then you have a health insurance raise, the premiums raise.
Yeah.
So pretty much, it's kind of all equated down. Your salary is nothing. It's pretty much the same.
I know.
It's
I'm
flat.
so sick of it. It happens every year.
So that's where now you're adding the salary to the spouse and everything as a premium. Then what is it to them? Because you're giving all these incentives. We like on 3.5 or the average or whatever it is. But once you're adding this family and everything to them, for them, do they really feel that they're getting it, or they say, my paycheck is not changed?
I think what they're saying is it's up to you if you want to. You have options this year.
They do, but at the same time, they will take it. At the same time, they say, you know what, my salary didn't change.
It will change. If you want to take care of your health and make the right options in life, then you're going to see a benefit.
Yeah,
Because family, like when you add your family, the insurance, the premiums increase and your pay cut just cuts down. Like that's what I'm coming to.
So
You want to wrap up this subject?
Yeah.
We need to leave before midnight.
Yeah, there's contributions by both the employer and employee. And I think both sets of recommendations, the salary, the market adjustments on that side, and the participation and contribution on health care on the employee side is a fair balance. That's my opinion.
Okay, that's good.
So I'm going to push before do we have consensus from council that we can proceed with this health care plan option? I'm not asking about the market and merit. I'm just going to assume that. Thank you very much. Now, but we have to get things moving to start our annual enrollment.
Martha, on that one, what are your assumptions as far as, you have a blend of who's going to pay, who's not going to pay?
The assumptions are 80-20, which means we expect 20% will move to the base, but the plan is, the pro forma is also designed that we don't lose if more move to the base. And if everybody stayed where they were, we would be at that 2%.
And if half the people go to the base, where would we be?
It's structured so that we get ahead based on the premium structure so that, again, remember, this year it's the same. It's still at that same. We're going to see those savings next time.
So just to be clear, the premium plan, which is equivalent to today, has a healthcare spending account, but the base does not. So that for those people that are interested, they would probably stay at the premium because of the potential
If that
savings.
matters to them, you'd expect them to stay at the higher plan, yes.
Right. But with the proposal, there would be an incremental cost to the employee to maintain that premium plan. So there is a
Correct.
kind of an offset. I don't know how much of an offset because, we haven't really discussed how much of a percentage the employees would pay or co-pay, if you will, on the premium, because that is a determination for whether they were going to take the base versus.
So I will also tell you this. since we're sort of asking you for some questions, the difference in dollars, according to the modeling we've done, between a $40 employee deduction 50 is $20,000. So not a significant amount as compared to what our health care number is.
So it's more personal of a determination based on what they expect their spending to be in healthcare claims as to whether they would select option 1 or option 2. But we've never offered an option before. This is the first time.
I'm still a little confused. If the original Blue Cross Blue Shield increase, just for argument's sake, was $790,000 for the 7.9%, let's say. But we're saying with these other options and the new structure, we can get that down to $200,000. You said 7.9 to 2%.
Okay.
So to be at that new 2% or the $200,000 increase level, you're saying that 80% of the employees would need to...
We've assumed 20% would move down to that base plan.
20% would stay with the no-cost base plan?
No. They would stay with the Cadillac plan,
Okay, so
where the premiums were higher.
80% would stay with the
Current plan.
current Cadillac plan.
And now pay for it.
Okay, and then 20% would go to the base,
Correct.
no cost.
No cost for the employee coverage if they do the wellness incentive.
And a reduced premium on the family coverage.
All right, and how did you figure that 80% would be willing to do that?
That's an assumption, and that's based on some trending analysis that Hilchess and Woody helped us with. And again, we've modeled some others.
Well, I support the what you guys have laid out.
Yeah, I think.
I mean, if you want a yes or no, whatever it is.
I'm more curious of what dollar numbers we're actually talking about, what that 5.9% difference would be. Because I think that each year the insurance companies are going to be increasing. There's going to be a percentage increase every year. So this is going to fix the problem.
We're talking, and first year, no, this is a long-term strategy. You're correct.
Yeah, but insurance premiums will continue to go up no matter what we do.
Our insurance premiums are based on our health care claims experience.
Okay, but they're also in it. I believe that insurance companies will keep on inflating.
That's always
that's the nature of the beast.
that's the nature of the beast. That doesn't
So that's
change.
just going to happen. So this is going to fix that. So, I mean, is the 2% versus 7.9? Is that 5.9% $100,000 that we want to eat in order to keep the benefits rich for our people, or is it $700,000? I mean, that's an important.
Yeah, that was
the percentages don't matter as much as the actual dollar that it matters to us. So I really not feel comfortable.
Over time, I respectfully disagree.
What was
We're
the
talking about dollars here.
no? The claims are always, it's like your accident insurance. You know, like you go wreck your car, you won't have the same insurance.
I guess I would argue I don't care what the
But your
dollars
insurance
is
is never going
if we
down.
can drive down the cost.
And you're
7.92, why not do it?
and you're using a very very conservative number, right? Like of 2%.
It's about rough math. It's about $100,000 this year.
I'm also. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I'm also curious in terms of the median age. Do we have like an average? Not average, but like, you know, it looks like we're bringing on staff that's a little bit more younger than the older staff, and that plays into the long-term healthcare costs if we're thinking long-term, right? Because I mean, if you have an older workforce, the chances are that they're just going to have more healthcare costs. But it looks like the face of our staff, over the years.
It's a wash.
It's a wash.
Is it?
Well, think about the population.
Not necessarily.
You can't predict.
You can't.
I mean, alternative is to not do it and accept, pretty significant increase. which I don't
$100,000.
think- Yeah, well, that's a lot of money.
But it's not, it's a long-term strategy. It's not, it's important to remember, it's not an issue for this year alone. It's an issue for the years out, and it's only going to get worse.
The 100,000 forever.
Plus whatever, yeah. So it's going to grow.
It's a sustaining savings or cost, yeah.
But just to give Martha some direction, is anyone totally opposed to what they laid out, or are we okay with
I
letting
think
them?
the proposal is good. It gives some choice and power to the employees. It's kind of like a usage fee. The more you use, the more you're going to be paying. Regardless of which plan you choose, there's always some co-insurance kind of payment, but it's going to be higher with the lowered premium one.
My final word on this is we'll be able to provide real data when we talk about this next year, and see that it accomplished what we wanted, and evaluate the movement and what it did for us. But the real numbers will come next year, and clearly a report to come, and we recognize that.
So you will give us, actually 2% is perfect, but you'll give us with what kind of scenarios and all those things, right? It's just like preliminary.
Yeah, we'll work on some practical scenarios. Really, we just wanted to be able to continue to move forward with refining the concepts we've given you here.
Yeah, I'm fine. I have one final, you don't have to answer this now, but I'd be curious to know if with the premium plan, even with the employee contribution, the monthly contribution, but with the family rate coming down, is it a wash? I'd be curious to know that.
So I can tell you that we've structured it so that every option for family is less.
Right, I hear that.
It's the difference of 1% less versus 29% less, depending on which plan you'd go to.
No, that's good. Next.
So did I hear from everybody? Nod, head nods? Okay.
You want
I know.
Until I have more information.
It's being taped. There's a camera, too.
Refusal.
All right, we'll move quickly. Really just wanted to give you a bond update, debt forecast. You will definitely see more numbers and scenarios of this as we come into the budget, but know that in this year's budget, we will have the full debt payment for McCrimmon Parkway Phase 1. I don't have that number. What is it, $800,000? About $800,000. McCrimmon Parkway Phase 2, just based on the projection for where we'll issue those bonds towards the end of this calendar year. We'll have that partial debt payment in this year's budget for that portion, just like we had a partial portion for Phase 1 in this year's budget. And then just for anything related to the MAFC renovations project, that bond issuance is sort of still on schedule for fiscal year 19. So no impact of MAFC in this year's budget.
So I'm sorry to stop you there. Just on that one. So we've picked a design firm.
Correct.
We hopefully will.
You will be talking to them May 2nd.
You're not expecting to start construction until 19?
It'll take 6 to 8 months for design.
All right. So you're talking about in summer of 2018.
Which would be fiscal year 19. Mm-hmm.
You would start the construction.
Well, and we've already started having some strategy about, and again, it depends a whole bunch on that design concepts of whether it impacts MAFC operations, and does that also affect our budget? Closure of a facility, some things offline, those kinds of things.
I guess you'd expect that, for renovating. But we think it's going to be, a year, 14 months before we can, worth of design, before we can start. I guess a couple months to put it out to bid.
Jerry's working on all that timeline. They've just started the planning for your meeting on May 2nd. you'll be getting, the way we did that, they're going to be bringing you something to sort of check in on first before they go to a next step and then start design. So there's several months here, then there'd be the full design, and then there'd be, we'll have to time the bond issuance with some of the other, we had to do that, remember, with the first stage related to our financial report. So I could see it being July of 18, yes. Okay. Other proposed funding for major projects, we've got Morrisville Carpenter Road that we will need to deal with. Really have to look at this in kind of two buckets, because one is our expense and then one is just cash flow. So the general proposal that I think you will see is for us to secure some debt financing on what is a short-term basis, 7 to 10 years, for our share of that. There's a number of debt mechanisms that we're at least evaluating for your consideration. And then we can use our fund balance for the cash flow share, and we still have that high level of fund balance rather than taking it all out of there to do that cash flow funding with our other projects as well. And then the other one that you have up for consideration is the town center. These are the same numbers you've seen from Rich before for the approximately $2 million for the roundabout and the stormwater improvements for the Phase 1A that is necessary for the library. We've talked a bit about ladder truck 3, just some numbers. It's a $1.2 million purchase. Takes 12 to 18 months to procure. And Todd talked about this earlier in the plan, so I'm assuming there may not be any more questions about the truck.
You have that cash, right?
We have the cash. Yeah, this is one of those things that behind the scene Jeannie balances into that vehicle apparatus reserve. You talk to the former fire chief. I think you need to be a fire engineer.
Yeah. Train us, we will not leave. That's the good. And this.
I would never. It's too scary.
That's one way to get rid of it.
Heaven's been one too.
All right, Martha, go ahead.
I'm not going to be in front of you when you're driving that truck. All right, land use plan, again, should not be an unexpected item. Courtney talked to you about this in depth. After her analysis, it was much more really expensive to do 3 separate plans with 3 separate public input and comment periods rather than to sort of bite it off all at one time. But it would include the detailed focus areas of the 3 areas that we talked about at the retreat. It is approximately $200,000. That's not that different from the last time this was done or our transportation plan. I know, Mayor, I know. Enterprise system, even a bigger number. Remembering.
So it leaves off, we're not doing TOD, because we already did
It's kind of, it will touch your Wake Tech and McCrimmon extension just by virtue of proximity, but not a new plan. Excuse me. Enterprise system. Remembering that we're still working on that path and decisions, and we've talked about the fact that depending on what the ultimate solution is, there's a broad range of costs that could be associated with this project. We would plan to liquidate the existing PO and recapture that approximately $200,000 that is in there, and we are recommending appropriation of an additional $300,000 just to set it aside till that project is complete. That should help us with any eventual recommendation we bring you, which we don't know at this point, and also recognizing that, you know, one of our failings last time was really not recognize that there were other project costs associated with that rather than just the purchase. And we've heard very much what Councilmember Garamella has said about who's in the driver's seat and what we ask for, and lots of good lessons learned. But we're really just trying to make sure that we can get this done, and we've set aside the money. Anything that's not spent gets returned to our fund balance.
So is SunGuard ready to give the money back?
We have not done anything yet about that. So we're in that. We talked about whether we would go to RFQ or straight to demos, and we're still evaluating that. And we have existing resources in the IT budget that could help supplement some of that project training. The work still has to get done as some of the staff is working on that project. And then just the other one of note, this one's not a huge one. We've been doing this for a couple years now. We've been focusing on getting those projects that are in progress complete. We've been holding all of the sidewalk money to kind of reconcile it for you. Thankfully, almost all of those projects are underway now or imminently, and we're going to see some results. But what we are recommending is very similar to some of the other capital project funds. If we offline this to a capital project fund, it would keep it where you want it and not have that rollover effect and carrying forward every year. You control those reserve accounts. You manage them. It just sets it aside, and it would roll any excess funds over to the next project. I do plan to recommend another appropriation to that, if only for some project design for some of those things that are on our list. We do have funds that we also need to appropriate for that airport project. Just a quick side note, because I know we're late, the SPOT or STIP, I never get my acronyms right, the next phase of request for bike ped projects is going to open up. The only one that we had left over from our last round that hadn't already been approved, and remind you, we've already got some significant financial commitments out there for those projects, is Morrisville Parkway. Benjamin's quick and dirty recommendation, and he's going to talk about this more on Tuesday, is resubmit that one and let it go. I mean, the next cycle will come in a couple years too, but we'll be talking a little bit more about that. You don't have to decide that. But I would recommend we establish a capital project fund for our sidewalk. The other thing that's sort of out there is we've got the $78,000 that's still in there for that Davis Drive McCrimmon, and we may be finding some ways to deal with that related to some of the accident stuff and all that kind of stuff. And now we get to what, speed round? Jeannie liked this. Okay, branding and wayfinding. Well underway, but two big major chunks still out there. One is our own signage. So not just town hall sign, but all of our facility signs, etc. Significant cost to replace those signs. And then what really initiated this was our destination wayfinding several years ago by multiple council members. And so there's the real decision points are how deep do we want to go into that? So if we wanted to do a very comprehensive RFP of every destination wayfinding sign, and there's cities that have done that, Holly Springs, Clinton, that's a significant component. Or if you already know where you want those signs, we could shortcut that. So, and some of that depends on, you want to get this done and over with, or do you want to spread that cost out over multiple years?
What is that cost?
Several $100,000. For our signs alone are at least $100,000. The ones we have to replace are $100,000, and that does not include the town hall sign, which we're kind of deferring. So you could expect to pay a sizable consultant fee for a wayfinding RFQ, and then there would be the cost of production.
I think we have a pretty smart staff that can figure out where we need signs.
And I sort of ask the same questions, but it's knowing where you can put them on DOT roads. It's significant. Let me ask this question: Which one of those do you prefer comes first, the wayfinding or our own signage? Any thoughts on that?
So,
What do you mean by wayfinding? Because different times.
Right, the definition of wayfinding. So we have wayfinding signs now on Morrisville Carpenter Road that says, the fire station's here, the town hall's here. You're talking about something even more.
The wayfinding is a very broad. It's entrance signs to your community. It's the signs that tell you where things are. It is directional signs. And maybe that's what I need to bring back, is really what we're talking about with wayfinding. I can send some information out on that.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
Personally, I think that's where we started this conversation.
It is.
3 years ago.
It
4
is.
years ago, and I'd like to do it.
Yes,
we got
because
sidetracked with logos and slogans and buttons and stuff.
we need to let people know they're in Morrisville, and this is where you need to go.
But it's been a while, so I would love us to move forward.
When you say town signs, you mean like the Indian Creek Trailhead?
Everything.
Sign?
Everything.
A cricket field.
Is there a list of is there 15 of those?
More than that. I mean, we have an inventory, yes.
And some of that I think could be staggered, the introduction. I mean, some are.
Stephanie talked about only when you needed to replace them, or is that just on vehicles?
Well, I think that's what we're talking about. And you're right, staggered all at once, how to split it up.
Well, let's get
I'll play with that.
plan.
I'll play around with that.
Bring information forward so we can kind of conceptualize the breadth and depth of it, because I think we all have different ideas of what that list might be, and then associated costs. Because my concern about phasing is that it's going to look different. That's just,
Don't get a list from us.
well, just
they're already different.
high-level categories.
Yeah. I mean,
we have 8 different welcome
Right,
signs.
right,
It's
exactly.
already different, so
Right.
It's only
You'll be less different.
I'll put some more information together. All right, Pew House, we've I don't know how many times we've mentioned this and really not talked about it in depth. The thing I want you to think about is if we do nothing, that house is going to start deteriorating.
Right.
And yet the amount of investment really kind of relates to what we might want to do with it. And we really haven't had that conversation. The recommendation might be we need to get somebody in here that can sort of assess that for us. We do not have that skill set on in-house before there's any significant expenditures. But example, you can't put fire and security systems in unless you put utility in, or electrical, and we already know it's limited by parking, and so we may just need to engage somebody to help us facilitate that discussion. We just don't have those skill sets.
Parking opposite, right?
I'm sorry?
We have parking opposite, right? We level the Ben's bar.
But the property is partially owned by the railroad. There's all that.
Yeah. Council chambers, we've periodically talked about whether there needs to be some spruce up in here. Those chairs are terrible to sit in for a long period of time. The carpet is worn and old, as it is in Town Hall. The lighting and acoustics could be improved in here, but there's a cost to that. So I don't even know that there's appetite, but I wanted to ask the question.
I think it would be good to, consider it. I know that a couple of years ago we kind of redid the chair situation, but we haven't really updated the chamber itself in a while.
And I'm not talking about for this year's budget, but this has been punted every year I've been here, which is why I really wanted to just sort of throw it out there. I'm not recommending anything in this year's budget for this council chamber. Do know that the whole projection system is part of the IT refresh this year. So that is being taken care of. I would tell you I think the carpet in this entire building needs replaced. That might have something to do with me spilling a whole cup of coffee on it last week, too.
Martha, do we, this room behind the vending machine, that's sort of a, it's like a 70s basement that this house gave us. Is that needed for HVAC stuff anymore, or the server room or anything like that? Or?
You talking about the history room right over here?
Yeah.
It's actually supposed to be used for fireproof records.
Right. So anyway, do we need it for that use?
For fireproof records? Yes.
And when are we going to move the fireproof records into?
We just haven't done anything yet.
Okay. All right.
So what's going to happen in that room?
You have to meet at Starbucks with people.
That's right, go back to Starbucks.
Well, and that's really why it hasn't been activated, because we have to figure out the history, and it's possible that we would want to set up something in the back.
Okay.
You wanted to leave.
Want to rent out the town council chambers?
No, I don't want to rent out. I will go on record. I do not want to rent out the town council chambers, but I get requests all the time, and we don't have a policy. So I BS my, sorry.
My gut tells this is kind of a, I don't want to get
Special
religious.
place.
This is like a sacred room. This is where we do town business, and I'm not sure I want it used for anything else.
People are all, and honestly, they don't want to rent it. They just want to use it. They want to use it for free. But we get those requests, and I would really like to establish that as a policy. I do not want to rent it out. I do not think this is an appropriate room to rent out, but we get asked.
I agree.
Do other towns actually do that?
I don't know that answer. My guess is no, but I don't know that answer.
But other towns might have other facilities that have chairs that you do like a meeting.
Right.
And we're a little short on that, so I understand why. But
Yes.
The library.
Brought that forward, I think I'd approve
Library.
the other than
Non-rental. Agreed.
this is only for governmental use or something like that.
One of the things you'll hear from Todd on Tuesday are some meeting room options that's part of a conversation he's having for some town use. So you'll hear some more about that on Tuesday. All right, last one, and this may be premature, but as we're looking at our mobility and how we do business, iPads are really an effective tool sometimes. I know you're still settling in on the Peak Agenda, but this is a very compatible product with the Peak Agenda. You can now get them with the Microsoft Office functionality. There will be enhanced calendar and email functionality. It is very social media friendly for all the social media that we're doing in town. And believe it or not, they are less expensive than laptops. So,
Is that one?
this is one. This is a personal one. So, Councilmember Garamella has one.
I never got a laptop.
And this is one size. You can get them the same size as a laptop. It's just a different kind of tool. Again, that's a think about it. We're using them pretty effectively in working with our customers in the field.
For the phone? No, that's a very big phone.
Well, if we're, right, I was going to say
and
the
of course,
keyboard.
I have
Right.
because I'm a typer, so it can be a phone.
More of a FaceTime.
The iPad thing was that's what
I do like that it's smaller. I do like that.
So some of those things, just because we don't get a lot to talk about. So again, some of those things you'll see in my proposed budget, some you won't. There's lots of stuff we haven't talked about that I just did not think was worth the time spending that you'll see in a proposed budget. So let's talk about when you're going to see a budget. May 5th, you will get your electronic and hard copy of the budget. We continue to try to make it a user-friendly readable, concise, condensed product. Jeannie will make the budget presentation on May 9th, and we will open our budget portal again for public comment for that. We have a work session scheduled for May 16th. Public hearing, May 23rd. The portal will close so we can feed you those comments. And we're proposing an in-meeting, and I think it's already on your schedule, an in-meeting work session at the end, because we've adopted and we're working towards approving that budget on June 14th. And that would be the real time that you talk about adjustments, modifications, and changes so that we can process those for you and get them back for you to see to facilitate that June 14th adoption. We did reserve another work session date. It's not feeling to me like we'll need it, but we could. And that really relates to the next page, which is what do you want to see, hear, talk about in a budget work session? We've got some takeaways here, so don't need to rehash those.
More discussion.
I had just a couple of things. I just wanted to know, sometime during this budget process, will we do a review of, what are some of our CIP wish lists that we talked about, or are we going to do that, separately, just because there was this, I've been reviewing just some, I don't want to talk about it tonight, but just.
We agreed last year to do it as part of the budget.
Okay, yeah.
And it's the allocation of.
That's one thing, and I don't want to talk about those specifics, but there's a couple of things that I want to throw out there. And then will we also get just projections of what's in Parkland payment in lieu and that kind of stuff? Just it's probably already in there, but I need to find it. And that's about it. I've got a couple of other ideas, but wait. I'll just send my questions in. I've got some other ideas, but I'll just wait.
Okay.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I'm interested in I don't want to call it the one solution project, but I want to call it the project where you're looking at finance system replacement and understand that timing a little bit more. We had a presentation this year already, but I suspect this is a multi-year project, and you're going to be doing some things in the next fiscal year, how that's going to affect the budget, and that there's capital and staffing expenses. To understand that a little bit more, the McCrimmon Parkway project is huge. How does that affect cash flow? There's got to be a lot of movement there, and also our Greenway cash flow situation. Those two projects are significantly impacting our debt, in various areas.
For me, I think last year was my first thing. We listened, and then we did all the thing. And towards the end, when we really wanted to speak, I thought the time was not sufficient. And then the discussion came and said, "Why are you telling so much in the end?" So I don't know when is the right time to talk, because there's presentation after presentation after presentation that is just goes in. So when is a pause time? I say, okay, do we discuss then? What is the mode of operations? That's what I want to have.
It's up to us.
Yeah, so we're moving.
But we want to have a discussion.
You could put the schedule back up there and just look
So-
real quick. So, I'm sorry, Martha. Can I?
You want to go first?
Yeah, so Friday, May 5th, you're going to get your budget. You're going to do your thing, come back the next week for the presentation by Jeannie. So we give her a chance to kind of talk us through it. Mm-hmm. And I imagine even that night we'll have opportunity for discussion. Mm-hmm. Then we have a week later, another opportunity for discussion. In the meantime, the public is speaking. Then a week later, 2 weeks later, there's another opportunity. So you're gonna get a lot of opportunities.
So unlike last time, because there were continuing sessions, like till we didn't complete in one time.
The difference was that we went through revaluation. There was, it was a lot of the conversations about the revaluation, the tax rate, things like that. I think it sounds like there's money without doing that, an increase, and it's just a question of how much are we going to do given the revenue that we are projecting. Yeah. So I don't know, but I feel like we're going to be able to get into it a lot sooner.
I'll sort of supplement what the mayor talks about. I don't think there's a lot to talk about this year, so I do think that streamlines some of the presentation we've done. And I'm not trying to call you on the table, but we kept asking for what you wanted to talk about, and we weren't getting that information. But one of the things we're going to do to kind of enhance the thing is we'll go ahead and provide the high-level overview of what the requests are to facilitate the discussion and the questions. I also ask you come prepared to do that. You have to do your homework coming in as well, and then I think the process will be better.
And the discussion between the council is more important because we all take in and say, okay, this is what we want. Because it's all more of head nodding, and then are we okay? Then we don't really get time to vet between ourselves. Okay, what do you think? And that's where
I think we'll have more time this year. But Martha's absolutely right. Be prepared.
That's absolutely
we were reading the material. We shouldn't be asking questions about stuff that's sitting in front of us. We should be prepared to talk about it, discuss it, but not,
We should be collaborating and discussing.
And if I could add, I would say the May 9th meeting. I mean, by then you had the budget, you should have looked at it, you should have read it, you'll hear Jeannie's overview, and then say it on the 9th.
We might have you give the budget presentation.
I'll do it live from Disney. That's okay.
We are planning on putting the same sort of summary of everything that's being asked for outside of the base budget. I think that really called the attention to it. We're trying to put some narrative in there that helps, and really, I guess my ask is look at the big picture of what we're asking for, not the $3,000 items. Is focus your look at the big ticket items or the ones that matter to you. I think that helps the process. Is rather than everyone.
Is there any room?
Pardon me?
Is there any room? It's already. I'm just looking. Give us that booklet now.
I don't have it ready yet.
Staff's always looking at ways to kind of reduce, streamline the deliverable because it makes it an easier consumable item for you to have your takeaways. So you can get to your discussion.
We
keep
appreciate
trying to work
that
every year to get it more condensed. And same thing with presentations. I think they've considerably gone down.
Well, we're all veterans now of at least one budget, so.
Well, and hopefully, a lot of the big things that are mostly heading your way at this point.
Yeah.
Right.
Very good.
So, right. I agree.
Yep, I agree.
Sort of give us a hint that there's going to be personnel requests. There's 5, a ladder truck. Steve mentioned the CIP. Mark concurred that that's going to be sort of part of the discussion, things on our CIP list and their costs. So we look at if we want to allocate any fund balance to that. Were there any other little projects or things like the public safety building just comes to mind because we talked about it. Will there be a way to sort of, is that in our future? Is that more a CIP discussion that's going to be part of our talks this time through? How we can get there?
Public Works or Public Safety?
The Public Works building.
There will be a request related to the Public Works building.
Okay, so there will be a menu of things to sort of really discuss more than what we've already seen.
Yeah, I think I sort of said that at the outset. This is not everything you'll see. This is key selected things I felt like we needed to talk about at this point.
No tax increase.
I am not recommending a tax increase. Correct.
I will add that, and this wasn't orchestrated at all, but talking to all the mayors on Monday at our monthly meeting, I don't know that there's going to be one municipality that's asking for a tax increase this year. I don't think there's any bonds. At least it was not all 12 of them were there, but of the 8 that were there, Nobody said they were going to do it.
So are bond requests only allowed now on a election cycle for municipalities? I know the counties can only ask.
I don't know where that ended up.
Well, the county governments and school board is, yeah.
Let us know.
The counties can only ask on the even number of years when there's election cycles. So we can only get a school bond.
The rule is right now, we could only ask for a municipal bond at a municipal election time. So whenever that ends
So
up
it's the same. Yeah, it's the same.
Jeannie, good job.
So.
Thank you, Todd.
Yeah, and just to echo what the mayor said, it would be, barring a crisis, after a revaluation year, it's kind of probably unusual to see a tax increase.
Right, because you've set your
Wake County.
level. Well, they've got a difficult situation.
We always got a member on it.
All right, we got through the whole thing. Woohoo!
Thank you very much. I hope you found it helpful.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Brought music to my ears.
I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Motion and second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. It's 10:33.